Thank you.
Good evening. We welcome you to our regular meeting, city council meeting tonight. I've asked Councilman Ward if he will offer our invocation and Councilman Clough if he will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Our Father in heaven, we are grateful to be here this time. We're grateful for a free country. We're grateful for the rights and liberties that we have, and we pray and hope that we might be able to sustain them and uphold them. Grateful for those who are in our armed forces, and we pray for them. We ask for a spirit of camaraderie and peace to be with us throughout the proceedings of this day. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen.
Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, gentlemen. Move on to item 1, approval of the agenda. I would like to delete item 5. I'm not ready at this point to have a recommendation for the power board member.
Mayor, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve the agenda with the deletion of item number 5.
Second.
Thank you. A motion and a second.
Bellis and I.
Ranger, aye.
Clough, aye.
Ward, aye.
Thank you. Announcements, item 2. Anything to announce? Anything coming up? What's playing at Brigham's?
And now we have the Big 5-0, a comedy about growing old. If that can be funny.
It's
pretty good
not funny.
Look forward to seeing it. We're coming in February. Item 3, declaration of abstentions and conflicts. Anything to declare at this time? Okay, item 4, consent agenda. Item A, approval of the minutes. Consideration to approve the minutes from the city council meetings of 1/9/18 and 1/10/18. Also, consideration, item B, to approve the renewal of the following on-premise licenses for alcohol licenses for Red Robin and St. Helens of Washington.
Mayor, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second motion.
Motion and a second.
Ward, aye.
Clough, aye.
Ranger, aye.
Bellis and I.
Thank you. Item 6, agreements. Consideration to approve a resolution authorizing and approving the carbon-free power project. Power sales contract with Utah Association Municipal Power System, the initial budget and the plan of finance for the project and related matters.
Thank you, Mayor. We've spent a fairly exhaustive period yesterday. Both of you attended the CFPP meeting, informational meeting, as well as our work session. I'm confident that you all got through the documents last night after we left. And no, our intent, again, as I mentioned yesterday, was to place this on the agenda if the council had a desire to do so. If not, we're comfortable with tabling for 2 weeks. And if you do have any questions, let us know and we'll get those answered. And then hopefully staff, of course, the recommendation is approval on the carbon-free power project. So if there's no other questions.
Just a question. I'm assuming staff has looked through those agreements.
Yeah, and correct. The power sales agreements actually mirror very closely to our other power sales agreement. I mean, certainly there's some nuance associated with the carbon-free project. And not only do we look through it all completely to make sure there's not changes, and as you'll notice in the packet, there's actually legal counsel that will review it too and make sure that there's nothing odd there. But we particularly focus on those changes with the carbon-free project. And most of those changes will be associated with kind of what we discussed. But the power sales contracts in structure are very similar to what you have with Horse Butte, Nebo, all of those. So in some cases, when we see the paragraphs very similar, we know how they function. But there'll be paperwork that'll still go in even after the council approves it. Council Starkey will still do his portion and those types of things. So again, big bite. We've been talking about it for a lot of years. So I know that our at least one councilman is kind of new to him, but the other one was on our power board, so has had some experience with this discussion. And of course, our council's been talking about this for a number of years in this project. So, but we're comfortable and we're grateful for all your participation yesterday in both meetings.
How often are we coming in this early on a pre-build stage? Is that typical for your power sales?
We've never had a nuclear project, so part of the reason we're this early on is because of the nuclear project. As I think I mentioned, the costs associated with nuclear power generation is almost nothing. Once you begin a fission process, it goes indefinitely. The problem, the cost with nuclear projects is typically twofold. It's the build and the regulations. And this is the value of the small modular nuclears, is because, of course, the build, as you heard yesterday, the costs there get substantially lowered because they're small modular nuclears. They're built in a secure place and then placed, not built on site. And then, and so the construction is low. And then, of course, with our partnership with the Department of Energy, which is substantial, as you heard yesterday, 50% contribution from the Department of Energy, $500 million. That regulatory process is being sped up as well. And that's their whole goal. Their whole goal, the Department of Energy, is that not the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, but the Department of Energy's whole goal is that they create a set of established, approved, and understood plans that then they in the future can say, if you adhere to these plans, here's your process that's much faster, instead of having to start from scratch with every set of plans. And so this is very early for us, but this is the only option we have to be this early because of all the processes that need to go. I think they said the review of right now it's about, I think the last I heard is it was 19,000 pages of submittal. That's 36 months in review with the Department of Energy. Just that.
Have you been tracking? They're not completely sold, correct?
When you say completely sold, the whole entitlement, the whole amount?
Yes.
No.
And have you been tracking how quickly that is filling up? Is there?
It,
I realize we have some space allocated likely for us through our UAMP, but
so, well, yes and no. The first bite, of course, is UAMPS, and I think we're currently now at 100 and something megawatts, 150, let's just call it 150 megawatts of a 600 megawatt project. That won't go up substantially just because of the size of our communities in Utah and Idaho. But we know that we will not go forward without 100% subscription. So what's happened is there's been this kind of reserve period to see where the UAMP cities are going to sit with their final entitlement. And then, as Doug Hunter mentioned yesterday, there is quite a bit of inquiry with respect to, particularly for nonprofits, so other joint action committees like ours from around the country and that have now come in. What Mr. Hunter has indicated to us is they right now have enough interest on the books. Now some of those will drop off, but they have enough interest on the books right now that they can fill it up. Oh, and remember too, we got we got 100 megawatts that the Department of Energy is purchasing themselves. So 100 so we're now down to 500 megawatts. But they've been hesitant to kind of make any commitments yet. We also have had for-profit organizations. So I don't know if this is one of them, but a for-profit is Rocky Mountain Power. Rocky Mountain Power could say we would like to participate. They would be our third tier of group to invite because they are a taxable entity and they affect the taxable structure and non-taxable structure of the facility. That works for us. We've done it before, but it just changes a little bit of the dynamics of the financing. And so they're the third tier.
And just for the people listening here, you're actually wearing two hats because you sit on that UAMPS council. So when you say we, some of that's not the city we, it's the UAMPS we. Is that
correct?
Right?
So to explain that, UAMPS is a joint action nonprofit organization that's whole purpose is to collectively come together and to bulk purchase power, which we could never do on our own because we're too small. Well, you could buy it, but not at the same price. So the cities, the 40 some odd cities comprise the UAMPS organization. So the UAMPS organization is the cities. It is not an all powers requirement, so you don't belong to UAMPS and they tell you what you're going to buy. There are a number of projects within UAMPS and you decide what fits within your portfolio. There are a number of projects out there that Washington City doesn't participate in because it doesn't fit within our portfolio. And so that's a good distinction. Thank you, Councilman. So as a member city, I sit on the board of directors of UAMPS representing Washington City.
I would like to say, after being on this process for the past 2 years and learning how our power structure works and studying a lot of the innovative approaches that our council, our city and staff and council have taken to diversify our portfolio of our power company, I'd like to say thank you. I'm grateful that we're looking forward to carbon-free power, getting it on projects so we can have good negotiation of contracts and good relationships with these people that help us provide power for our community. And so I think it's going to be an interesting approach to our power and a great thing to add to our portfolio to make it a little bit safer and secure. So I appreciate the efforts that have been done.
My really only concern at this point is to be sure that we're really clear about any possible exposure we have as the years roll on, and that exposure becomes a little greater. Is that just UAMPS exposure? That means it's our exposure. If it doesn't come to fruition, are we already looking for other sources of power when our base goes away in 2020? So I just am not sure that I have a clear picture of what our exposure is, because I keep hearing that we're 100% covered and guaranteed, and I think that that's probably not in the long term the case.
Well, there's two parts of that. The first is we have long-term contracts in such things as NEBO. That's our gas powered. That's because we're an equity partner. We have long-term contracts in our small amount of CRISP. We have long-term contracts in our Horse Butte and Pleasant Valley wind projects because we're equity partners in those things. The part we're most exposed on is our base power. So Washington City has a little different structure than other cities. Our base power load is right now market and always has been. We don't have a coal, for instance. Many cities have a coal base load. We're actually at the moment grateful that we don't have a coal base load, because that's not only getting very expensive with the regulation, but it's essentially dead. And so right now we have a market product that approximately how many approximately megawatts is the market product? So we got about eight megawatts. Again, Washington City runs about 37, 38 megawatts. We got about an 8 megawatt exposure that will conclude in 2022.
Yeah, it's not on the base thing. I'm certain that you'll be looking for options for that. But these startup costs for the carbon-free project, we heard a lot about 100% coverage, 100% return
Yes.
at various points that we can go off ramp. Okay, so my concern is, at what point do we financially become exposed without having yet seen any power?
Well, as Doug mentioned yesterday, during the first tier, which is through 2020, we're 100% covered on a reimbursement unless we choose to withdraw, and then we're just committed to what we've invested up to that point, which is, I think I saw that was about yeah. And if we move to the next phase, of course, your reimbursement component goes down, because as he said, the risk gets mitigated at that point from NuScale to the city of that, not to the cities.
Now,
NuScale, it starts to adjust.
Yeah,
And so yes, we know precisely when those ramping downs occur, and that's why we set the off ramps when they do as well. And the interesting thing about nuclear that I'll say is no different than any project we've come into is nuclear, your risks are on the front end. Many of the projects we're invested in is on the back end. And a good example of that is the next best technology out there is combined cycle natural gas. And the problem with and we're looking at that. That's what we're actually benchmarking the nuclear against. The problem with combined cycle natural gas is we already know that CO2 is ramping through a very high regulation process. So that's when you start getting hit. This is how they basically affected the coal industries. Coal, you came in cheap, pretty solid fuel. Risks were not there. It's a good solid, and the risk came on the back end. And that is, you'll put these scrubbers on now, and eventually you'll just close it down. So in this case, it's just been turned on its head. The risk that we're associated with is upfront, because it is this technology that's going through this new process. The real value to us is no different than we did with the Horse Butte Wind Project. The federal government came in with the Horse Butte Wind Project and says, we're committing so many millions of dollars because we want to stimulate, this was under the Obama administration, we want to stimulate renewables. And so we're willing to give millions of dollars to this project and others, but we qualified to help you put the Horse Butte Wind Project in. That's why we get the Horse Butte Wind Project for the cost per megawatt that we do, is because of the federal subsidies. This is also one that is just very positive for us because of several things. And Doug didn't mention this, but we have not only the $500 million commitment from the Department of Energy, and again, those are contractual issues, so they're not. But we also have the tax credits. Nuclear tax credits have been in, and both administrations have been supportive of that. Both sides are supportive of that. So yes, you still run that risk a little bit because Congress can, decide to close the doors. I mean, it's about as sure as we can get with respect to.
And I'm not sure that the risk is great. And I certainly am of the opinion right now that we shouldn't allow that risk perhaps to back us away from this project.
Sure.
But I think that I'm not clear about what those exposures are.
Well, and what I'd ask you is if you can get us your specific questions, we'll answer those.
Okay.
Part of your challenge might be getting the specific questions.
Okay,
but-
it's pretty specific. If this project went down the tubes and we never got power,
We have a commitment.
how much would we have expended
Depends on what phase
from
we.
the city?
It depends on what phase we move out.
Okay, and we ought to be able to articulate that by phase, shouldn't we?
Yeah, and that's in your packet.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll show Washington. There's a page I believe we put in the packet that shows exactly Washington's commitment at each of the 3 stages.
That was last night.
Yeah, well, I think it went in the packet whenever the packet went in.
Okay.
But we can walk through that so that you understand it, because it might be there, but whether you're saying, well, I understand that I can see that now.
There's always
We can walk through that so that it's clear that that's what that is showing, because I can see where you might say, I don't know that that's what that was telling me. But yes, it's very clear with regards to if we stay with 11 megawatts, which again is not our full portfolio. Matter of fact, the question was asked last night if 11 megawatts is maybe just undersubscribing. But right now our commitment is to 11 megawatts. They can clearly say at this point, staying at that $65 a megawatt, which is our walk price. So that's a good one to stay at. Here's our maximum Washington City at 11 megawatts at stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. We can do that.
Thank you. How did you like that little lesson on your power?
I don't personally see a need to table it for 2 weeks. I'm fine.
I'd like to make a motion to table it. I think that there's no pressure for us to table it. There's no reason to hurry into this. I think the staff has done a marvelous job. I think I'll sleep better at night knowing that I have digested some of this information more and have a clearer understanding of what we're getting into.
Well, then I'll go ahead and second that.
A motion and a second to table.
It helps Councilman Ward sleep better at night is an eye for me.
Bless you.
Ranger, aye.
Ward, aye.
All right, thank you.
So we'll see this in 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah, so that would be my recommendation. If you can get your questions over earlier, then we would like to see this.
Actually,
we're
be
meeting
3
with-
weeks. It'll be 3 weeks.
Yeah,
Whenever the next meeting is.
but we're meeting with UAMPS in February with the legislature.
Yeah, but
Is that on this topic? Is that?
It won't be as conducive to that. The people that will be there, there
Right.
are some people that you could maybe get into the corner and ask some questions to, but it's a legislative reception.
Okay.
So you may not get the first.
They're gonna be getting pulled every which direction, so you're not gonna be able to get a real good time to talk with them.
Well, we can get them on the phone in the meantime.
Right.
They're good to get on the
Well, he gave me his card last night, so I'll.
phone. With Doug, with their
Yep.
teammates, and I think we can do that also.
Okay.
All right, any other questions or discussion on that one? 3 weeks.
Sorry, Mayor,
No
just
worries.
one other question. Are we intending as a council to bring this back into a council forum for discussion? I guess we will at the time of the vote, but
Yes.
We can always discuss.
It'll just be on a vote, but
We're anticipating a work session. I mean, if that needs to be, but at this point, My recommendation is to funnel those questions to us. We'll respond to those questions in one form or another, and then the council kind of comes and say but you'll have discussion you'll have the opportunity for discussion in the council.
Thank you.
All right. Item 7, wrap tax distribution. Item A, consideration to approve request for wrap tax distribution to Brigham's Playhouse. Applicant Jamie Young.
Thank you very much, Mayor Nielsen and distinguished members of the City Council. If I might take the opportunity to first thank the citizens of Washington City and Washington County for their 4 years of support of what we set out to do in 2014. Some of them are here today, who've been great supporters and help at the Playhouse. They represent about 22,000 audience members who have come through our doors in the last year. And I'd also like to thank each of you for your past support as well. When Doug Knapp and I moved here 4.5 years ago, we saw that there was a void in the community for a theater. And we believe in the great importance and power that a theater can have in unifying community and society. It can act as a mirror, holding a reflection up to itself, teaching a little bit about itself. It can also act as a great inspiration and a great motivation to make some positive changes. And we feel like in the 4 years that we've been in operation, that we've been able to become an important part of the community and to be able to do exactly what theater is intended to do. And we believe that the quality of life is better in Southern Utah because of that. We recognize that we are a growing organization. Despite my almost 20 years as a professor in theater and 12 years as a department chair, there are a few things that are different about running a business theater. And I'm learning and I'm growing. And I still don't have all of the answers. But with these good people out here, with your help, little by little, we're coming upon those answers. So we, again, humbly request some support to help supplement our efforts to carry on with the tradition that Brigham's Playhouse has established for the last 4 years.
A couple of questions. One is, what's your status of your 503?
We have formed a not-for-profit entity. That entity has not filed yet for 501c3 status with the IRS. So according to the state, that entity is recognized as a not-for-profit organization, but it cannot offer tax-deductible donations to people yet because of that missing 501c3 status.
That was one of the concerns. A year ago, we got told that they were right there, we're getting it, because obviously we have a stipulation of that. So it looks like you're continuing to operate under Mr. Dose. Is that how we said it? Dose? Ernie Dose?
Oh, yeah, Ernie Deuce. Yeah. Yeah.
So we're operating under his 503Cs continually?
Yes, that's the way. Yes, currently. They are a separate 501c3 institution.
Are there any costs being incurred by you for the use of that?
No.
Somebody's allowing that use of that.
Right. The first year, there was a 7% cost. Yeah. Yes, and that created some understandable concern. And so in subsequent applications, he's waived that fee.
In the breakdown, there shows 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 line items that are tied to Arts Inc. Expenses, commissions, music, advertising, rent, and royalties. That just passes through him.
Yes.
And what's the reason for that? Because
Could you give me the date on those line items?
No,
It's part of your,
It's just part of your overall profit and loss, January through December of 16.
it's in your other expenses towards the end of your,
It was shown for 2016 and not 2017.
Yeah, that's probably what that is then. He's not getting any money from the RAP funding. All of that passes through to expenses that fit within the parameters established in the application to you all for RAP funding, and also that falls within the parameters that he operates under to legally give us money for purposes. If we were to operate outside of his parameters of operation, then he could not give us that money either. But he's not profiting.
It's an expense. It looks like this is money that you are giving to him, not that he's contributing to you. Their expense is not income.
I guess I'm not seeing in the application where that is. I'd be more than glad to respond to it.
It's
No,
separate
I-
from your application.
It's in your profit loss statement. you gave us.
January to December of 2016.
It's right towards the bottom of that where it shows other expenses, Arts Incorporated expenses, arts commissions and fees, arts and music, arts advertising, art rents and leases.
So that's the 2016 year.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, and so that was when that 7% was still being taken out. Now, other donations from other outside sources that come through him, he's still taking that 7% for, but not for the RAP funding.
So like rents and leases, what would you be renting or leasing from him? He's not your landlord, I'm assuming.
No, but he, through Arts Incorporated, our lease has been paid on multiple occasions.
I guess what's been difficult for us is to just kind of understand that relationship, because I'm looking at the same thing where they are, and it tallies to $71,000 total. And if it's really, is money being funneled through him or whatever, it just feels kind of vague and hard to understand from my point of view. And it's just love a little bit of clarification.
And so other donors who donate money donate to Arts Incorporated with the request that that money be used with Brigham's Playhouse. So a large portion of the funds that go through Arts Incorporated are from those other donors. And then the RAP funding, during the early formation of the RAP funding, where I worked with the council in preparation for that initially back in 2015, was it, Mayor? I think. And under the counsel of Attorney Starkey, we discovered in the state regulations that that money had to be channeled through a not-for-profit organization, and that a financial sponsor could be formed for organizations like Brigham's Playhouse.
How soon do you expect to have your 501c3?
Well, we could do it at any point in time. The concern that we have at the Playhouse is the ability to continue to operate. And if, I'll give an example, I requested over $200,000 from a particular donor last year who had made it sound like they were interested in giving us a large sum of money like that. And in the last minute, they had to back out. We still benefited from them by receiving $10,000, which we were very grateful for. However, if we had switched our organization over and had counted on that $200,000 and didn't get it, it could have been detrimental to the future of the company. And so we're in a sticky place right now of trying to look in the crystal ball and see which way we're going to be able to maintain operation with the business. If it were a clear-cut answer of knowing that there were going to be some continuing sources of funding for the not-for-profit organization, it would be easy for us to commit and move straight forward with that. Otherwise, it is in our best interest to be able to continue to talk to investors, which if we were a not-for-profit organization, we could not do. And so we're just at a really tricky point in time of trying to decide how are we going to be able to best continue providing the life-changing experiences that we intended to provide from the very beginning. I don't know if that answers your question directly, but
Well, I'm beginning to see why it's taking so long. You know, a couple of things I'd like to say is, one is I appreciate how articulate your patrons are, and while I have not answered every email directly, they are extremely well written, and I was impressed to read them all, and appreciate their enthusiasm for what you do and our enthusiasm for your involvement of some of the younger people in that opportunity, and the volunteers that help you with that. But there's no question in our mind that the Brigham Playhouse is an asset. On the other hand, our RAP rules require that you be a not-for-profit. And we continue to struggle that with you every year, and possibly to some degree are going to have to make a reduction or a delay in some of the funding that you've requested until that is resolved, because those are the rules that we have to follow, and we've found a workaround, but it's not a very straightforward workaround, and it continues to create a dilemma for us.
we were, if I might respond to that, well in the throes of making the transition, and just to be frank, I got quite gun shy after the last council meeting. We had in our preparations to make that transition to a 501c3 corporation, gone and done some research throughout the state and met with 3 different not-for-profit theater organizations. One who had just made the transition from commercial to not-for-profit within the year, another that did it about 15 years ago, and one that did it about 30 years ago. And each and every one of them said that there were pros and cons either way of doing it, but that if there were a secure and consistent, reliable funding source, that the not-for-profit route would be the best way, and otherwise to stay away from it. And so when I came in and saw that there was, for the first time in the 2 years that we had been applying, some understandable resistance from the council, it began to cause some questions in my mind about the viability of making that transition. These other organizations that we talked to, and I know this made you all laugh last time, are receiving from their city councils $360,000, and one of them from the state line item, the ZAP tax, quite a bit more than that. And so these theater organizations become jewels and treasures for their communities, which they begin to value, and the taxpayers would like to see them continued, and therefore want their tax dollars to be applied towards those things that increase quality of life. I, from the very, very beginning, have been telling the council that my original intent was to be able to become self-reliant, to stand on our own.
That's what you said.
And I would love to be able to do that. But one of the humbling lessons that I have had in the last 4 years, despite my 20 years of being a professor, is that I'm not sure that it's possible without community and governmental support to be able to operate a theater. We are at the bare bones of operating expenses at the Playhouse.
I understand. And whether you go 501c3 or you don't, it doesn't mean that people can't still make donations to you. Our difficulty is the restrictions of the RAP tax. And I think we've shown that we value your operation by donating to you all of the years that you've come before us. But I don't think it's legal for us to encumber future city councils and tell them what they have to donate to in order to give you a secure stream of income from city council on the basis of the rules of the RAP tax. And I don't think we can do that. And
we actually know that's, we only got 7 more years of rap tax, and then that goes away.
So the security that you want from the council is probably not possible under our own rules and restrictions. Doesn't for a minute mean we don't value it, and I think we demonstrated that we value it. But your status is still, I realize you're in the middle of trying to make decisions about that.
I just need to get some clarification, just for my own understanding. I would never have applied in the first place if at one point in time it was not permissible and legal to do so. And so
Yeah,
I'm
not
just
saying that it's not, but it's not your 501c3, and that is a thing that we've always said was going to happen, so that we felt like it was going directly to you, and there was not maybe not a conflict, but frees you in reality.
so
to be
so
your
the
own
laws have not
organization.
changed. It's just
Laws have not
okay.
changed.
I see.
We just see this intermingling of funds coming back and saying, well, we're not paying out your rap tax, but we're paying out our, they're leaving your facility one way or the other, whether it's rap tax funds or your funds.
If you don't have
You know,
that
it's
seven,
all- It all supports
Yeah.
you, period.
if you don't have that 7% for the other funds, it's 7% you don't have.
You're showing that an EIN number in your application, have you, but you say you haven't done that,
Yeah,
done
it's
the IRS yet?
yeah. The IRS has given us the EIN number to recognize us as an entity in the state of Utah.
Okay, you just haven't filed the.
We haven't filed for the 501c3 status.
I'm not real familiar, but just thinking out loud, simply like some of the grants we talked about that are state appropriations and stuff, I would think 503C would be very beneficial to you and moving forward, because I agree with you. I think most of these types of theater are supported by public interest and public entities. And most of those do usually have that attached to them, I know, at least in the state of Utah. And so, like I said, not telling you what to do, but maybe to encourage and say, just even outside of the rap tax funding, there are some other fundings available out there that you've mentioned, but they do require usually you to set yourself up.
Right.
Long term, I think that you've answered at least kind of points a little bit, because one of the concerns that I have had is how viable is this? Do we build you up for 10 years to say, okay, the rap tax went away and revenue this? I think where there may be other things that if we build up are self-sustaining. So those are the things that we would like to see you hear from you, say, okay, here's where we're headed, here's where we see ourselves becoming self-sustaining. We want to be a part of this community long term, which we want. That's why we're saying, yeah, we want to fund you and keep you here, but we've got to drop that day too, that our money's disappearing.
Can you tell me a little bit about, I realize you're in between trying to decide nonprofit or for-profit. Can you paint a picture for the council what your organization looks like if you become a for-profit, or ticket prices change, marketing changes, staffing change?
We originally formed as a commercial for-profit organization. We have a not-for-profit mission. Any profit that we would be making as owners of the business was to be rolled back into touring shows throughout the state to help with anti-bullying kinds of things. The reason why we chose, even though we have a not-for-profit mission, to operate in a commercial format is for control. My 20 years of experience had shown me time and time again how original missions and visions of not-for-profit companies can easily be changed because of the board format and structure of those organizations. And I know it's a personal bias, but that was the main reason for choosing that. And it was easier to start a commercial entity, and we wanted to get going with it right away.
So how solid is the partnership that you have with this 501c3 as far as a long-term? Is that a long-term viable solution for you to maintain that partnership?
If we can find some funding sources, so we're having, a meeting one week with potential donors, and we're having a meeting another week with the Red Cliffs Mall, who has been talking to us for about 4 months now about moving over to their space. They want to convert Sears into an entertainment center, and they've talked with Brigham's Playhouse about possibly becoming the anchor theater for that cultural center for the community. And so that would be a commercial enterprise. Our feeling is we want to stay in Washington. It's difficult to do so if we don't have the funding, whether it be from the council or from a private citizen, to be able to continue to do that.
So when you talk about the funding, what would be, I know what you've requested, what's on there. Are you feel like you're asking for far less than you need, or you were thinking if you had your way, you'd ask for a lot more?
If we could, we would ask for more. And I wouldn't think that we would be frivolous in our spending at all. Organizations that do what we do usually have budgets around $1 million a year to do just what we're doing right now at about 400.
And you would expect that to come from outside sources to do that. There's no intent whatsoever to drive that internally.
Well, we hope that ticket sales will increase. Right now, our marketing budget is next to nil. Almost all of our advertising is through social media or word of mouth, and we're still able to bring in 22,000 people a year. For example, if we were able to have a marketing budget, we could increase the number of ticket sales.
Do you have room? I heard you were a sellout all
Yeah,
the time.
yeah, we have our average this last year was about 119 people per performance. That's 4 shows a week, and we have room for about 220 per performance, and we have the ability to add about 3 or 4 more performances per week.
How close would sold out shows bring you to profitability?
Sold out shows would definitely, if we get our numbers up to about 155 per performance for the 4 shows, we would be at a break even point. Then we could start adding more performances.
Can you tell us a little bit about your summer camp and for what you're doing with the kids?
It was so successful this last year that we've added a second session. So we plan on having 2 sessions. This last year we had 126 participants. In the morning, they came in and did classes. We hired professional instructors. Some of them former students of mine who are professional performers in New York City who gave us an amazing discount on their rates. And one of them is touring right now as the Phantom in Phantom of the Opera. He was right here working with our kids and teaching them how to sing this past summer. And they would take the classes in the morning, and then in the afternoon, they participated in a rehearsal process for a fully staged musical. We were doing High School Musical Junior, which you probably know is all about anti-bullying and self-esteem building. And we actually had 4 complete casts doing that show over a 3-week period of time. And then this summer, we hope to do that over with 2 different shows.
Checkbook. Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion. Sure. Thanks, Jamie.
My name is Michael Eaton. Do you need my address?
We know where you live.
Oh, I hope so. That's almost a threat, Councilman. Okay. I do not know the amount that Jamie is asking for, but I personally feel it's too low. I think it's a line item for this council to give $75,000 to $100,000 a year to this. You asked about the nonprofit status, Councilman Granger. It's very difficult to apply for a nonprofit status without continued funding. The RAP tax continued funding from this council would help them support and be able to apply for that. You talk about applying for other entities. You're looking at 2 gentlemen that work full-time that are trying to operate a theater and trying to do it with a massive, massive, small group of people. And so they're doing the best they can. And to apply for the grants and permissions for all the other entities that are out there, Councilman, takes a bit of time. And they need to have help. And the only help they can muster is they need some financial help so they can hire someone or pay someone or be able to, maybe one of them go part-time and be able to work full-time to apply for grants. It's a, as you all know, Councilman, it's a hard process and a lengthy process. I know Superintendent Granger, you know the process, and it's long and it's hard and it's difficult.
People in our community that probably help with that.
That's awesome. That's wonderful. But at the same time, I think we need to realize that any support of any kind of theater needs a minimum, especially if they want to go nonprofit. The history around here of theater is unbelievable, and I don't think everybody realizes what it is. That's the first thing they built when they settled here. They called it a Bowery, and it was for meetings, and it was for, to believe it or not, debates, theater, dances, everything. The biggest sport was horse racing, so, and I've yet to see that come back. So, but that's right. There was.
Well,
I
Mr.
think
Eaton,
so.
one thing that I
I'm
have
trying to
on
watch
this,
the-
that with everything you're saying, and I appreciate your addressing, is I feel that what's kind of a disconnect is not the lack of our desire to support. The thing that I feel the disconnect is you're arguing time and we're trying to understand viability. And a lot of
The
what you're saying
viabil-
hasn't been communicated clearly. That's why my comment was, so what would be considered proper and appropriate? It
Right.
wasn't an ask to demean or anything else, because
I don't think you are, but I think the proper and appropriate for them to be able to apply for their nonprofit. But right now, the way nonprofits are established, they have to find a nonprofit to funnel.
Fine, and that's, I'm
And
not
that's what they
arguing
need
that.
to
I'm
do.
arguing that if he was wanting more, the original comments that drove this relationship was the intent was to be viable on their feet.
Right.
And so what we're trying to go is that has shifted, that has changed. We don't want anyone feeling threatened or feeling like they're not valued, obviously. And so if there has been a shift, and if we need to change the dialogue and say, well, look, I know I was asking for 65 and thought I'd get down to 40, and then I thought I'd get down to less. But after reviewing this and going through the time and going through the effort,
Right.
I'll be honest, what I'm here to do today is say, well, I need to go for $100,000 going
No,
forward.
that was my comment. That's not his.
And but that, I'm just saying that as a clarity is, I am only a person stating an opinion of trying to clarify, because I understand things change. I understand things get hard, and what we intend doesn't always turn out to what needs to be done.
Exactly.
So that we're not arguing that, but we feel like it's important to be clear and articulate in what he needs. We don't want to feel like they're not supported first and foremost, because we do support Brigham's Playhouse. And
I
we've
hope
made that
so,
very
because
clear.
right now I see a dearth of arts in this community, and he's the only one.
And as you can see, we're trying to articulate, we have some things we'd like to clarify so that we can continue this partnership.
And I think that's viable, Councilman, but at the same time, the clarification needs to be understood that in order for him to apply, there has to be some minimum guaranteed income that can come. And I know, Councilman, you said, well, 7 years is supposed to go. I don't know about you, but I've yet to see any tax done away with.
Well, this one has
There's a deadline.
Yeah.
Now, it may get renewed, but it is a
It'll go
shut
again.
off. So, and we can't commit future councils. I mean, you have to.
Oh, I know
Is
that,
that fair?
but I think there's a commitment there to say, okay, look, we'll commit this X amount in this time frame. We want you to apply for the status and get going on that. But then we
See,
have
and that's
to,
what
yeah.
we've done in the
But then I
past.
think we need to understand too that when he does come here, he's trying to do that. And I feel for the man, because I was in the council meeting, and to stand up here.
This is what's set up in the bylaws of the rat tax, that the only entities that can be given that have to be.
501c3.
Right.
So we're trying to stay within those bylaws
Right.
that bind us. And so that's why.
And he is well. I hope you realize that. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say. I hope you do continue to support him. He is trying to stay with those, but he's trying to do it in a way till he can get it established.
Well,
And
it's
right
not
now,
like
that's
I
the way he has to do it.
decide
Another one.
Whether I want to go or whether I don't.
Yeah.
He's gone through the
Yeah.
cost process other than filing and saying, okay, I am now. And I guess my words were simply saying, from my vantage point, what I know, to me, it would probably be worth going ahead with, because then all of a sudden you do get the government entity.
You do.
Option two, that right now is close to you. And so that's why I said what I said, is possibly it may be worthwhile, because then it isn't just the city, but you've got state, and you've got a lot of other parts of
Federal
monies
too.
that are out there that are appropriated for those very things. and they become open at options to you. Right now,
And I think with his viability comment, I think that is a result from trying to become viable when he can apply for all those other entities and be able to go out and ask Mars for 100,000, 200, 300 million. Yeah.
We really want him to be successful. I think
Yeah.
I speak for myself, and I think I look from other councils that we've always wanted to support to be successful. He is an asset to our community. We realize that. But we also don't want him in 7 years to disappear because our money disappears. We want him to have been built up to where he says, look what I created in this.
And I don't, knowing Jamie like I do and knowing, yeah, I don't think they will. This is where they want to be. So
We certainly appreciate that, but you know, we also have a limited set of funds in the RAP funds that come to Washington City and have to look at other groups that.
But what my councilman now to you is, what other arts group are you giving money to?
It's art, recreation, and parks. Okay, the RAP is.
I realize that. I realize that. But what other arts? I want a specific arts. I understand the parks.
No.
I understand there's supposed to be a park.
You make a good point.
Well, the other one we've had the city band, which has been minimal.
Yeah.
We have supported them as well. And if there's others that come, we certainly would probably want to support them to a certain extent. Of course,
But I think sometimes they look at the fight. I think sometimes they look at the fight some people go through and they don't want to anymore.
I think
That was your decision.
the comment that, well, yeah, I think the comment
Anyway,
that they may not have viability or be able to ever completely sustain without public
Yeah.
help and assistance is a bit of a sea change, and I frankly understand trying to muddle
Thanks,
through
Mike.
government
Mike.
agencies and trying to figure out where you best place yourself, because in some cases the government giveth and it hurts you in other ways. It's hard. Yeah,
Well,
My
it's-
hope, I just really feel that, you know, I think after hearing this, and I know I'm new to this, and I appreciate everything about this in our community. I love the Playhouse. I love the concept of why we've created this tax, because in all earnest and honesty, reviewing how it's been dispersed so far, I haven't seen a lot of arts in the RAP. And I love the idea of increasing arts in our community. And I really feel what would fortify me in this going forward, because I would like this to be a continuing relationship, is maybe it's a reconsideration of communicating your intentions going forward in a longer term in the event of securing better funding and securing a better relationship within us. And if it's a different number, I think it's been very clear in the way it was articulated today that the intent of making this viable and no longer needing funds is not your objective anymore. And that's, I think, a new discussion that needs to be brought before us and let us reconsider what would this look like going forward. And I think that's just fair in renegotiating and saying, well, this is how it started. I have learned a whole new business. I had a different set of rules. And now that I've got into the rules where I need to play, when I made those first requests, there were some things I did not even intend to, I didn't even understand. And so I think it's fair to really start negotiating in a forward-looking approach, because it's a valuable asset to our community. It's a beautiful thing. And if it requests more money, I think it's fair to ask for that and see if we can negotiate that going forward. With that being said, with the money that's being requested now, I think the hang up that I have is I see you on this teeter-totter of private 501c3, private 501c3, and it's complicated, and I don't know how to run your business. I'm not going to go there. But understanding the direction you're going in a clearer detail in the time frame would help me articulate more of support for it. So that's what I would appreciate. Thank you for your time.
I think, well, if you want to go.
I'd just say I think that was well articulated. When you first came, it was a temporary thing, and you were going to get on your own, and then you were going to get the 501c3, and now that doesn't sound like what you're saying. But our dialogue has been somewhat to say, but this is what you said you were going to do, and now you're not doing it, and that has created some, I think, some disconnect, is to use the term, and that should not be interpreted as not support. That would not be true. Okay. But we do need to be sure we clarify it and that we're operating in the same way. So I think that's been some of what's created the dialogue, is because we've heard one thing and now we're hearing another. And it doesn't mean that we can't hear something different, but we're going back to what you said before and then that wasn't working. So I think it's created that. So, all right, sorry.
Oh, we're good. So for me, 2 years ago, the grant in the absence of the 501c3 was to help get some momentum going. And I was fine with that. And then last year, the first application, we tied it to your licensing fees, but I wanted to see that kind of taper down a little bit. And so I didn't vote for the second one, understandably. Now, if you're going to stay private, then that's where I have a hard time, because our rules say it has to be for 501c3 or 501c3 intent. But with that said, I think that I'd be okay granting some funds this time that are tied to some line item, but I wouldn't be okay going forward unless that you were pursuing that 501c3, understandably. I think at the end of the day, it's the way you ought to go because it opens up a lot of doors for you. But
I have a clarifying question, and maybe council from staff can help me out. Is anything that he's doing in applying for the funds as is, are we skirting the needs of the RAP tax or the parameters of the RAP tax, or is he fulfilling it as it needs to be as he's doing it right now? Is there anything we're kind of like making this gray, or is he doing it appropriately?
Well, in terms of the application process, the application, I think complied with what the interlocal agreement was to implement the RAP tax and the appropriation of those funds to various applicants. I think if we're dealing with the 501c3 issue, I think that in the revised version of the RAP tax ordinance, it was specifically that it had to be to a nonprofit, and I think that the ordinance is drafted in a way that indicates that one can utilize an accommodating 501c3 to do it. I think what we had always said was that in our review of it, that the city council would take into consideration the use of an accommodation company in terms of utilizing some of those funds as a percentage as a payment for obtaining those funds, that Washington City Council could take that into consideration as it contemplated approving funds. So,
but it's still a workaround, and it still skirts the intent of the way the RAP funds were chartered out.
And see, my question in hearing the discussion is, does it?
Whether or not it's
we made it
legal,
very clear that we would take it into consideration.
And it's legal to do it the way it is, but I'd rather just be hit it straight.
The part that bothers me is you've got that percentage that was being paid out to these our citizens.
But
Part
we've
of our community, so it disappears, it leaves, and so.
Right,
but we've eliminated.
That was why-
But the
that's why
concern,
I challenged
and yeah, I'm on the same place,
to
but
encourage and say, hey, if you can get it, then it all comes to you, and we keep everything here.
but don't you think we've addressed that? If they're saying that all of the money is coming to them, I think we've addressed that.
Well,
I-
but what you see is that money's coming back. Yeah, you say, well, I'm using your RAP tax funds, but I'm taking my money and putting it over here. So it's leaving, even though it's maybe it's like saying, well, your RAP tax money went here, but I took my own money and put it over here. That's what I see happening. Now, maybe that's not the case.
Is that correct? I'm trying to understand this, and I know you run a business, and I appreciate any clarification.
I don't think I understand Councilman Turek's.
Yeah, but at least from what I've seen on your profit loss statement is, and you said, well, we're taking all the RAP tax money and it's staying with us. But then what is this money that's leaving you and going to Parks Incorporated, who's your sponsor? And I guess the way I read that, saying, well, I'm taking my own money and playing with them over here, but your RAP tax money's over here.
Yeah,
And I guess I
The
look at
net
it and say,
effect.
it's-
You're
yeah, it's
saying the
it's
net
all
effect
the
is
same
we
pot. I want
can't
it all to
distinguish
stay
it.
in your pot.
yeah. The profit and loss statement that you're looking at is from 2016, before we eradicated the problem.
So you're saying in 2017, there's nothing leading
Yeah.
you to go to Larson Incorporated?
See, and that's
From
what-
the RAP funding.
What I think would be nice to help
I guess
us.
let's clarify what the, from the RAP funding is. This is the thing I get when people come in and say, well, from the RAP funding, none of that's going over here, but I've got some pipe money's going over there. Well, doesn't it all come together when it comes into your pot?
Yeah, from other donors, he's still taking his 7%.
So they come through him to you.
Yes.
So does he withhold those coming in, or does he pay you everything that you turn around and pay him back out?
He has withheld them,
From other donors, but
From other
not from
donors.
the city.
Not from
other than
us.
2016
In
before we, yeah.
2016, before he established.
What I really
2017,
appreciate.
You wouldn't show anything coming back out to him.
No,
Because it would have come, he would have held his prior to coming, so it would all be income to you.
that's correct.
No expense.
Yes, and
But
he
if when my
uses,
trust fund comes through, I donate to you and I use your 501c3, he's going to withhold some of that.
yes,
That
yeah.
What I
And he
appreciate
uses
from
that for
this-
accounting.
What's really helped us is we looked at a 2016 summary sheet. You're saying that in 2017, it didn't operate that way.
That's correct.
What might help us is I appreciate the breakout. It helps us discuss things as a council to see that validated, that what is happening with the funds like you did, if that'd be possible to help us in future conversations. Because I'm seeing that we're talking about something that you're not doing anymore. And so if we could see that articulated and validating that, yes, we would like these funds to stay here. And I completely concur with Councilman Turek on that. It looks like we need better information so we can be a better partner in this.
Yeah, an application at the end, that's due at the end of a year is difficult to provide a profit and loss statement
Right,
for that.
and
So
I recognize
provided
that.
the
That's
most-
just one
most
thing that
current.
I'm just trying to tie in what's causing the confusion is I think we're going off of information that's, and we're trying, and I appreciate what's been provided.
I think that'd be appropriate. When we've done this with Jamie in the past, is we give him some now. I
Mhm.
think that's appropriate. And then we have another application process in June. And of course, that by then your year's up and those things become.
Well, and I mentioned this in the work meeting, that I really like the relationship between people asking for money and them getting advice from people who don't know their business. I wouldn't want to put a condition on this to force him one way or another and let him decide what is best for his business. And I think really the question before the council is today is do we value the entity as a community service sufficiently to support it, to ensure it at least stays here this year? Or are we willing to risk losing what it gives to the city to someplace else? Or
I would be in favor when on tying into that is to being okay with the appropriation. And when you come in the next time in June, to give us a clear understanding of what you would be asking for, fully asking what you think is a long-term entity. Whether we die in 8 years, that might die. And we already know that it's got a deadline. However, we've got 7.
Can I make a motion?
And that's one thing I think would be important.
Okay, I've got somebody wants to make a motion.
Okay, I move approval of the request for licensing fees, production materials, marketing budget, 54,113. Would urge you to get us that profit loss expense statement. Would urge you to decide if you're a nonprofit or profit, rather than maybe containing both of those within the same entity, which I think is causing some conflict for you. It's caused some for us. Nonetheless, my motion is because we are supportive. We do care. We hope you make $1 million and don't need our money anymore, but do appreciate what you bring to our community, and a lot of people do.
Thank you.
I have a motion. I have a second.
Second.
What was the total on that one more time?
$54,113.
I have a motion and a
is that
second.
the total ask? Yes.
Yeah, it's a total ask.
Thank you.
Or name?
Belts and nay, but I'm going to tell you why. One is I would be fine tying it to licensing fees. The other concern that we have is we have another application here that we have to consider as well. And I don't know that there's sufficient funding. that we have available,
That
so.
was my concern. I would have every intention of funding this, but probably a little lower amount now, a little more in June. That's my thought process.
Yeah, I'm not supportive of the whole 54 day.
What was your first point though? Sorry, Councilman Belliston?
I would be fine with supporting the licensing fees portion now and look at it back in June. We don't have sufficient funds to cover both RAP requests today. And so split it up. And that's what I've done in the past. Last year, I voted for the licensing fees.
Now, I had asked that of staff. Is that correct? That we don't have sufficient funds to do both proposals today? Is that?
Not to that extent.
We do?
He's saying we do. That was my understanding.
My understanding is that we do.
And that's not including what we'll be bringing in between now and June too, right?
Well, it's pretty hard to allocate funds. You don't know what's coming. We can anticipate.
Well, I know, I'm just
Those funds
asking,
that we-
yeah, I'm
those
just,
funds that we would allocate in June.
no,
I
I
would-
was just
I would
asking
be
if that included.
glad to amend the motion to say that the allocation would be in two portions, but I don't know that he
So I
necessarily has to
probably
come
would
back in
consider
front of
a little
us.
more than that on the second go around. I have to fund it to a higher extent if that's what he needs. Like I say, we only got X amount in the pot today
That's,
to allocate without allocating on
I-
future things.
Is that the case in which we do not have enough to allocate as is, or are you pending future?
Barry, can you come up and verify?
Because my basic, as I've been looking at this, is that we have sufficient.
When we did our application, we actually showed what was available, and there was just under 200,000, so 199,000, close, 700 something, it was close to 200,000. Our application is for 139,500. So that gives you the numbers. 100, so you're
You're at 100.
you're right at work. You're just a little bit under what is there.
so we do.
Just so you know the numbers, but that there is that much in there.
I wouldn't mind him coming back later just to talk to us and give us an update, but I don't know if that's necessary.
I kind of concur with what Councilman Love said. It gives you a chance to relook at things and say, you know what, really, do I need more? Do I really need to be more to be where I need to be? And to get, maybe it means give me a little more money. I can hire somebody that helps me to go forward in that thing, in those things. It helps us to know where we're going to go forward at, how we're going to go forward.
I just think
That gives us a chance for those funds to build. Like I said, we've got another 4 months of funds, then that can get approved that we can allocate at that point.
I didn't mean to restart the discussion.
So no, that's,
So
I appreciate.
Nay,
you.
nay.
What, the rest of the
I'd
vote?
rather be just having a-
Do you want to continue the vote or you want to re-amend your vote?
Continue the vote. They're not asking for an amendment, so. Continue the voting.
Continue.
Granger, aye.
Clough, aye.
Ward, aye.
Okay, so that passes 3-2.
Thank you very much for your support, for your clarity, and I promise an update in 6 months, whether we ask for more money or not. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank
Dan.
you.
Mayor, I'd like to echo what Councilwoman Granger said. I always appreciate the emails from the public. It was tremendous to just get more education and more input. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And just as a reminder on our ordinance itself, in addition to indicating that the city council may take into consideration any number of financial issues from an applicant. One thing, because somebody had asked, I think somebody actually asked this question, that is, if applicants received RAP tax funds, the city may request at any time an accounting showing how the prior RAP funds were spent. So somebody had said a follow-up.
We have
That's part of our
requested that,
ordinance and as part of the application process. They recognize that too.
and we have requested that.
Yeah, so just
Okay.
be aware that process, you're not coming up with that. The applicants all are aware of that as a part of that. And then the council wrote that into the ordinance as the ordinance was being written. Some of the same oversight concerns were raised at
But
the
when
very
I-
outset.
My point is, when I made the motion, I asked for that clarification. Okay, so it's part of the motion.
Sure.
Thank you and good luck. We want you to be wildly successful. Wildly successful. Okay, we'll move on to a consideration to approve RAP tax distribution for the Veterans Park.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. As our discussion last night in the workshop, and before you tonight to request funding in the amount of $139,500 $1,500 to complete the Veterans Park project. We had, along with that, we had two proposals that came in. One was from Watts Construction that came in at $364,073.92. We had one that came in from RNO Construction at $100
Our nose is at 312,642.
at $312,642. And so with the available funds that we have right now that have been approved for that, and then plus the $20,000, that brings us to the $139,500, which we're asking for to complete that.
Thank you for your effort in getting those costs down considerably. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to fund Brigham.
It made room.
Yeah.
And it's been a fight to do that, but we did it, and we can complete the project. And
I know you and other cabinet or members worked really hard to do that.
But not only did that, but worked, and actually we ended up letting some local electricians and others participate in the
the
project.
people are doing our local.
Yeah.
People
That
doing the
was
project are
awesome.
local.
Yeah.
I think there's only one thing that was brought up in workshop that I think would be worth discussing going forward is considering the gas and water amenities, how they'll work in for securing, whether that is to go as the plan is now or to incorporate that into a more secure design. Like Councilman Turk brought up, we want to maintain the function and the ability of the area, but maybe considering other options of how we present it and store it to where it can just be cared for and usable when we need it. Vandalism has been brought up as a concern, and we just want to make sure that the function and the use is addressed in the best possible way.
So what I would tell you is with the approval of these funds, I will look at that and address that and see where I can save money and where I can make it appropriate.
I'm not so much worried about the
and I would
money
do
part.
that.
I think the money has been requested properly. I really think it's just a matter of maybe the design might need to be adjusted to better serve the function there.
I'd like to see some of that come out of the council.
That would be one of my concerns with Councilman Turek, to maybe see if we really address the best possible way of designing that amenity within.
How about with the
Jamie.
approval of this, I get with council members and
I think we can do it as a workshop situation. Say, hey, here's kind of, here's what it looks like, here's what it is, here's how it's gonna function. Make sure
one of the main concerns I have is we are trying to get this done for Cotton Days. I've got 3 months and I have to start putting lines in, I have to start putting things in where they need to be and to come back in 2 weeks.
Gazebo and the
would be
pergola
tough.
are already built.
Well, they're going to be here Friday and they're in place. So you'd have an outdoor kitchen without a kitchen, in a sense.
Maybe it just needs to be discussed in a priority on some of those things, because it really is a very small design we're asking to be considered. And we understand that flat work goes down and you got to throw down pipe before you throw down concrete. But I think it does bring in support of what Councilman Turek has brought up, to just it might help to just do that last review and make sure we're doing the best possible thing for the area. And I appreciate that.
That's the one thing I've asked for a picture to see what we're looking at. It hasn't been produced. I guess I'd like to see what it is.
When in times past with the Cotton Days, they just brought in the grills, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so I mean, a worst case scenario, we're not worse off on the breakfast on Cotton Days.
Well, no, I
at
mean,
this
the
point.
concern is that it's a construction issue, so maybe it is, we should do it as it is now. You just want, Councilman Turek.
Oh, that's my point.
Yeah.
That's my point, is that we can take the time to do that. And it isn't driven by Cotton Days.
And if it isn't in a workshop, I agree that it just needs to be confirmed for the design and the benefit of just how it can be used. And I appreciate you working with us on that.
Yeah, I suggest we run the underground, because that's going to be really much a given anyway, no matter how we really redesign it. We're going to run the underground. That doesn't stop us there. We get it done. And then if we run into a problem with Cotton Days, it'll be really no different than we've done in times past by bringing the grills in, and that'll give you the opportunity to have time to look at it.
Thank you.
Why do you look at me when you're talking about those grills?
Are you feeling self-conscious, Mayor?
You know, I have one suggestion we might be able to solve a little bit right now. if, I know they talked about grills coming in. We have a griddle, which is what you're talking about, the griddle. So we have a grill, which we have at the community center, and a griddle. One of my right off the top that we could do and still keep that kitchen there is take the griddle out and just have the grill, and then roll the griddles in as they're needed, but still have that, and that would solve that problem. It wouldn't take up that whole space. The hood that goes on there would be much smaller for the grill and be able to protect that,
I
and
think
there wouldn't be a
we'll see
problem.
that design. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would like to see the visual of what we're talking about. I mean, we throw the dollar figure, which is a very substantial dollar figure, at that little piece. And we start to say, is that really the way it should lay out? I mean, is that really what we want to spend on that little piece?
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Barry? I entertain a motion.
Mayor, I motion that we approve the funding as requested with the amendment that we would like to be a part of the design and verifying how the design will work with the griddle, with the grill and gas connections, but otherwise approve it as is. Oh, man.
139,500.
A motion of 139,500. Thank you.
With that, I'll second.
I have a motion and a second.
Rick, guy.
Ellison, aye.
Granger, aye.
Clough, aye.
Ward, aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item 8, final plat. Consideration to approve the final plat for Grace Villas located on the northwest corner of Buena Vista Boulevard, Tortoise Rock Drive, applicant John Graham, Warm Springs Development Corporation.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just. Thank you. As stated, this is an application for approval of a final plat for the Grace Villas subdivision. This particular subdivision is proposing 30 lots and the area coverage is 2.99 acres. The zoning at this particular location is the multifamily residential referred to as the R3. The preliminary plat was approved back on August 27th of 2014. Staff's reviewed the request for proposal and proposed final plat conforms to the approved preliminary plat. Planning Commission reviewed this request last Wednesday in their January 17th, 2018 meeting. Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of the final plat for Grace Villas to the City Council, and that's based on the findings, subject to the conditions. Now, there was some discussion in the Planning Commission, and we would just like to clarify that we would like to make sure that maybe a sixth condition is put on this, just to add references to add a Class 2 monument intersection pin, and we'd like it right there by where that 44-foot, where that center of street and center of the street meet. This is for engineering purposes in case backyards or other pins get closed up. This will be a chance for they need 2 points to always be able to then reference from. And so after talking with a couple of the planning commissioners from that discussion, I'd like to request we add condition number 6 to add a Class 2 monument right there at those mid-street connections right there. With that, I'll be glad. Okay, at Michelle Way, and it's Michelle Way because it comes in, bends, and goes. So just say at the intersection at the 90-degree, yeah. Where the north and south and the east and the west meet at the intersection at half streets. So.
No, I wasn't here, but what size are these square footage?
The apartments, the townhomes?
The apartments, the villas?
Well, they have them on there. There's 1,021 square feet. That is what it's showing. I don't think that's both stories because when I take,
Some of them are 800.
they're 40. Yeah, there are two different sizes.
They are two-story.
They're both two-story, and they're two different floor plans
So
in
this
the
isn't going to
development.
fall into our low-income affordable housing. It's fairly
It
dense.
may be.
It's fairly
It-
dense.
It may be.
So that's 880 with the one-car garage, so you're gonna be,
There are some one-car garages, some two-car garages. There's two different units available, so.
One of the things that we learned last night, I think, was how well done a couple of our affordable housing things are because of the kind of management that goes on in those. Do we have that here?
Most likely not, and I'll explain. Usually when something comes to you as a final plat, it's for sale. That's why they do it. If somebody was to come with a project and say they had 30 units but didn't come for a subdivision, they just went through the R3 zoning and did that, more than likely it's going to be under one ownership, and then you have that, that safety of it being one owner. But my guess, without even asking the applicant, is they're going to sell these out as individual units. That's why they're doing the plats. So that's just my experience of all the years of when I see something like this, I can tell it's just they're going to sell them individually out.
And I suppose, goes on through the preliminary plat, I'm sure we addressed the parking, which the more we get into this is obviously something we need to work with an ordinance, because you can see the problem that's going to happen here. We ought to get on fairly quickly.
at least they got 20-foot driveways,
Yeah.
where the last one we looked at had no driveways.
No driveways, yeah.
That was
Yeah,
my
you're right.
problem with
That's-
it. They had no parking in a driveway whatsoever. This one has some.
There again, you go back to
Some in
your
it,
argument, it's a single car garage and what goes in those garages and in the car.
Yep. So we
Well,
do
what
have
this
that
provides, just to clarify that, it's basically 1 per 2 units
Yeah, that's what I'm
of
saying.
visitor
That's-
parking,
that's what
which
I'm
is
saying. It's probably something that we need to look at ordinance wise.
Yeah.
I agree with you. It is what it is.
But then we've had the same discussion about having our parking lots way too.
Well, those are
It really
two
gets there.
different-
It's
you got retail-
That's
you
a
got retail
I know.
parking
lot.
versus-
This is a
I know.
subdivision.
I'm just throwing out my seed for
You
future.
want to be
Just,
careful throwing that
I'm-
worm in the pond. You're going to get a big fish stuck.
it may be blowing, yeah, but I'm throwing a seed.
Spinach.
I admit, sometimes I'm thinking I don't want to see anything else until we have that ordinance in place, because it's not reflective of what we want our city to look like.
This is a final plat, so.
I know we're there.
And just to help you, just to clarify, directly to the east of this is commercial zoning. Flat out commercial zoning. I don't lose as much sleep when I see a townhome project. In fact, that's what I encourage and will for the rest of my career, always encourage multifamily townhome type projects next to commercial. I feel sorry for the folks that are north of this in Perry Landing, single family lots, and I'm going to have a commercial development right across the street on tour. I'm going to feel for those
If
folks.
the right commercial goes into there, I would feel for them.
Yeah, that's true. If it's great restaurants and a
That's right.
theater that I can walk over
When I
there,
can walk over and have a Dairy Queen.
smile on my face. If it's a Lowe's or a Home Depot or
Yeah,
something like
there
that, or a
you go.
Costco,
Yeah.
I'm going to be extremely
That's true.
frowning or moving.
Mayor, I'm
So-
ready to make a motion if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
I make a motion we approve the final plat for Grace Villas located on northwest corner of Buena Vista Boulevard and Tortoise Rock Drive.
I have a motion and a second.
Correct, aye.
Bellis and I.
Granger, aye.
Ward, aye.
Was that to include my little extra
Yeah.
note, I hope?
With that condition.
Six,
With the
condition six.
condition of
I'm
the
just-
class 2 monument.
Thank you.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you. Item B on the final plat's consideration to approve the final plat for Indian Knolls subdivision Phase 3A, located approximately Indian Springs Drive and Seminole Way. Applicant Andy Biola, Indian Knolls subdivision.
Mayor, as requested again, this is the final plat for Indian Knolls 3A. This particular portion of the overall subdivision is proposing 13 lots. The area coverage is 9.92 acres. Zoning at this particular location is the residential agricultural half-acre minimum, referred to in the zoning regulations as the RA half. The preliminary plat was approved back on August 27th of 2014 as well. Staff's reviewed the request proposal and finds it conforms to the approved preliminary plat. Planning Commission reviewed the request at their January 17th, again last week, meeting. Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of the final plat for Indian Knolls Phase 3A onto the City Council based on the findings subject to the conditions. And these are the standard 5 conditions. They did make a note. You'll see that little blue that stands out on your thing. They just wanted to clarify. It was just labeled as open space, but they felt they wanted to make sure it was common area and detention basin is what this is referred to on
So
here.
this has been done for a while. How come it's just now coming for final plat?
There's a multiple
This is,
list of reasons
They
that
had
that
a
took
drainage
place.
issue,
They had a
right?
drainage. They had to get that line that actually ended up going to the north and then shooting out to the west and then, across 3 lots on the back side of it.
so that line's in. and
That line's
taken care of.
in, all those things are taken care of. The road was, we had some dedication at one time we had to actually get rid of for this to come in on, because we put that road in a while back, if you remember, when we took away the old
that how we
back way
ended up
by
with that
the
parcel?
bridge.
In the southwest corner of the project.
Yeah. And so there was just lots of little things that ended up being labeled over other things that we had to just get cleaned up. And I know that, I think they went through a couple of maybe developers on this and some things happened. There's an array of things. I've actually been waiting for this phase almost since I've been working here. I'm hoping that we can get the road tied through eventually, all the way down to your house is what that's
I'd
my
rather see
hope.
it- I don't want the traffic.
I know you don't, but as staff, that I'm waiting for that road. I feel like
Oh, I'm-
then I can retire. Once that's in,
It'd be nice to get the subdivision filled out. and done.
it would. And I'm just, that'd be a nice road actually to just have for accessibility. It really
More
would.
traffic down your street. You don't like that?
How big is the common space / detention area?
How big is it?
It's like about a half acre.
It is
0.54.
0.54 acres.
Is that big enough, Barry?
Now, this was going to be full detention, but then when it just wasn't going to work as well. So that piping went in and this still need a little bit, but this is just kind of a leftover empty piece that was.
I'm assuming Public Works has looked at that, and there's no concern with that detention basin and the canal being right there that
That's why the line got put in. So
so this will be,
very
pretty
minimal, very minimal.
yeah, I just hate to see us suddenly turn the canal loose down through a neighborhood because we ponded water in the.
And I think it's going to be more common area and the detention's there just in case it's needed for, because the pipe is only so big. I think they just want to make sure that there is somewhere area there that in case that pipe gets too overflowed, that at least it's got a backup.
I assume that they would have for sure looked at that, knowing that canal. The good thing is the canal's in a pipe, but at the same token, it gives
Exactly.
way, it gives way.
Again, that's just part of the things that have been taking a while to get this where we are, but we're here today and seeking that approval. So
Well, with that said, and since it's in my neighborhood, I'll make a motion we approve the final plat for Indian Knolls subdivision Phase 3A, located at approximately Indian Springs Drive in Seminole Way.
And since it's in your neighborhood, I second it.
I have a motion and a second.
Is there any other conditions we need to be aware of?
not on this. That was the only thing that the planning commission made note of. And even though it's written in blue here, we'll make sure that the final Mylar has it in nice print and we'll clean that lot up instead of having it crossed. We'll make sure when it's recorded, the proper, printing is on there.
With that, Mayor, I vote aye.
Dallas and I.
Granger, aye.
Clough, aye. Ward, aye.
Thank you. That's approved. Item 9, public hearing. Public hearing for consideration to approve a zone change, Z-1801, amending a portion of the Stuckey Farms PCD by making changes to the site plan, villages, amending street cross sections as found in Exhibit E, street sections and curbing, and updating the zoning comparison chart. Applicant South Landing Development.
Thank you, Mayor. As stated, this is an amendment, so it is a zone change. That's how we take care of these. And stated well, there's basically 3 things on part of this amendment, and I'll just kind of head down here. Village 8 and 6 is where, at least on the site plan, the changes are happening. Of course, Village 8 will be reduced in size while increasing the size of the adjacent village number 6. Now, that's the simple part of it. then the densities are going to be changing. The density of Village 6 is also seeking to be amended from medium density residential to medium high density residential on that particular village, number 6. Village 20 is being eliminated from the project. It was originally set aside as a church site within the development that's been eliminated, just due that churches can go anywhere, and it wasn't probably going to be the best particular site. So it's not that this place won't have the opportunity to have one. It's just they'll come back to the city for a conditional use permit wherever it ends up being for the use in the area, and always for the height of steeples that are added on top there. So that's just what, we've kind of found with these PCDs, because sometimes they may set aside that part in the acreage, but it may not work out best with whatever church wants to come in there because of the location or the size of the parcel or things like that. So we've basically been kind of just telling them, take them off, and wherever you want to put them, we'll just come back later and fit them in under the
But
CUP.
do we require that they put one in somewhere?
No.
Because if it's like this, that's a church, isn't it? Or a public site.
Like now,
If it's,
I'm not sure of your question, because on the old plan, it was just labeled, future church site.
and does that create an obligation to use it for that kind of a public purpose? Because it's there, labeled church site,
No, they would never really have to use it if one never came.
but they couldn't use it for something else.
They wouldn't be able to use it for anything else. Yeah, that's the thing, is that
So
if
if
it's
we-
sitting on there and it's tagged church site, then we'd look at it and say, well, that's why I think it's best that we're just eliminating them, because
But if we take it off, then there's really no requirement that we have that somewhere in that village, there's a church site.
there's no requirement, no. But as we know well, living in our community, they find the places that are best and then acquire those properties or get donated those properties. It's one of those situations that kind of takes care of itself. It's self-policing somewhat. I can imagine someday there's going to be at least one church or a stake center sitting in Stookie Farms. Without blinking, I can say that with all assurity. At least one, if not two, when it's all said and done.
One of the problems when you get into when we start designating those sites, we've got one out in Coral Canyon that still sits vacant, that says future church site. It's one of the vacant sites out there because it's been designated as that.
And they can't fit, at least the LDS church can't fit one of their churches on there, so it'd have to be another religious organization that could come in that could fit on there. But they've already found out because of the way it's designed. I mean, it's got 3 streets on almost 3
Exactly. And
sides.
that's coming from all directions.
That one will probably sit like that, and eventually it'll get changed.
I don't anticipate that Public Works had any issues with the road profile or the additional road
No,
profile.
I was-
He's not here to ask, so.
Right, and no, there wasn't. I mean, they can propose, they've accepted. It's been through, if Lester gives his thumb up on something, then I usually don't worry or lose sleep. And it has gone through the Lester test, that particular road design. So they just wanted to make one that was more fitting for the designs they want to do. So,
And this is something just for a point of education on me on this, and I would appreciate just a clarification. On a lot of these larger developments, they come in with a basic vision, okay, this is what we're going to do. And as the development goes in, the development can shift and change as it deems necessary. Is that pretty much?
these amendments, you'll see them. In fact, Sienna Hills almost seems to almost on an average right now, because everybody's looking at Sienna Hills finally. We've been waiting a long time for Sienna Hills to finally get some attention. It's getting attention now, but the people that are coming don't really, they say, hey, we want to be here, but this is the product we want to do. So they'll come back and say, we need to amend our plat and change, this particular use, and they'll come before the council and do that. Coral Canyon's gone through a handful of amendments to their PCD. Stookie Farms, I think this is the 2nd or 3rd for them, and they're fairly new, even though they've been there for a while, but they're starting to grow a little bit now as well. So will this be the last amendment? Definitely not.
Because the most common complaint that I've received so far relative to this is when we start to have people start to build and we have this large development and they're sold, okay, this is what it is. Here's the vision. Come on in, build your home. That's going to be like that. An investment is made. And sometimes a lot of these places are people they're trying to make their last landing zone, And so they come in, they build it and like, oh, it's going to be this. And then something deems necessary. Now it shifts, and it's nice for the developer, but for the people who have already built in phases that exist, is that just what should be expected to anyone who builds in these places?
That's why we have a public hearing and the applications brought in. I mean, it's no different than if your neighbor wants to change the zoning on their property and go to a R2, same sort of process. They have the ability to do that.
There seems to be a trend, however, with a lot of these changes towards higher density. And that troubles me a little bit because we see the look and feel of it. We see the different densities in there. People see that. But the trend that I feel is, we've seen it at Coral Canyon, we've seen it at Brio, and we've seen it here, is that when those changes come in, those changes are towards higher density.
But I will, if I can add the other side, I mean, it's not an argument, but I will tell you, as we look at it, what tends to happen, I'm going to give, Sienna Hills is our best example. Sienna Hills came in and told us, we're going to put X amount of homes in this PCD. Okay, and that they got approved on, and I'm just going to pull I don't know the exact, but let's say they came in and said, we're going to be building 2,500 homes in this area. Now, what happened in Sienna Hills when things started to develop and developers started coming and buying land? Their lots actually got a little bigger than what Sienna Hills planned for. So there were less homes going in, and Sienna Hills' trend was really heading, and I know this sounds weird coming from staff or the city, it was heading the opposite direction. There was less density. Now, you may say that's great and fine. Well, here's the problem. They based all their sewer lines, their water lines, all their streets, everything based on a X high density. Here, now they're coming in with less than that. We've got water lines and sewer lines that are just, they're too big for the use that's going through them. And so Sienna Hills started coming in with actually less. So when they change over some of their higher density, I don't know if they're going to catch up to what the original proposal was. That's just, I need to keep that for your,
one thing I'd like to
Water
kind of,
mains is a great, there's no problem with water mains. Sewer mains, that creates some problems because then it sits in there and goes.
and it can sit and dry out, and it becomes.
and if I could just say this is just a point of clarification, because I do have a citizen that wrote me, and if I may just quote a part of this email, just so I can clarify why I'm voting the way I am. And it says, we're writing in regards of this. They're not in favor of it because as a resident of the Warner Gateway and within the boundaries, they strongly oppose this change. We and our neighbors bought our homes with the understanding of a master plan placed by Stuckey. The request to make a change will harm our property values, overall quality of life, and as a representative, we're asking you not to approve this. And I like their little fun note at the end. It says, if changes are approved willy-nilly, what is good for zoning in the first place? And in all fairness, all I'm saying is, as a point of clarification, because I've noticed with Councilman Granger, we have been shooting for higher densities when these amendments have come through, and I'm seeing more and more people bringing a very same old comment. And you've brought there's public hearings and everything like that, but it is just a concerning thing to see if this is just going to be a common thing for us. Should I just take this as common or what? Yeah.
I read the same email too, and I can certainly appreciate that residents' feelings in it, but I can promise you the exact same arguments were being expressed when Warner Gateway was being looked at. The exact same arguments.
Right.
Too dense, too many people, so.
So the email came from a resident of Warner Gateway.
Right. And what I appreciate on all this is, all I'm saying is point of clarification for me, because the last thing I want to do is be having a full vision before I vote on this. And I appreciate the counsel that's been given on this. And thank you. Likewise, Councilman Mellison, thank you for your words.
I don't think I got all the way through. If I may, Mayor, continue.
You may.
Stopped kind of at the church thing and then went off a little bit, and I'll just kind of come back. So changes on Exhibit E, which is the roads, curbs, and gutters. The amendment is to add a new 60-foot section, and you see that in your exhibit. It's the one circled in red, is the new the new proposed. And again, Exhibit E just shows all the different street sizes, et cetera. And also there was a zoning comparison chart, didn't make it in, but all it did was adjust taking the church off of it, and they adjusted when they made the cottages that the city council passed a while back. They didn't amend the chart at that time. We kind of forgot, so they brought the cottage in and put it in. So it's just a simple amendment for the cottages that popped into the zoning comparison chart. With that, the
While
planning.
you still have this up there, and I realize we keep interrupting you.
What's that?
I just said, while you still have this up there, and I realize we keep interrupting you, but can you walk me through this? I'm not following this.
The street?
Yeah.
Well, what this is all PCDs. We kind of make them put in how their streets are going to look,
Okay.
and they can propose street designs that may not fall in ours. And if Public Works is okay with it, and the Planning Commission, City Council, they'll accept a different street design. And so a lot of times in PCDs, we like to have, this one is somewhat of a mini boulevard, so to speak. It's got a median in it. And so basically the 60 foot just shows what the right of way is going to be. And then they also have open spaces as part of Stookie Farms on the sides of their roads. And that's what you're seeing on the right and the left, where it says landscape over there.
There's like 5, or how many are on the submission? You're saying that the one that in red is the what you have here is the one that
This is the amendment. Yeah, that's why I said it. They bubbled it out in red. This is the one they're wanting to add to the exhibit. The other ones are already in place. They've been accepted and approved and are being built.
The 36-foot street's the only one that's going to be private. That
Correct.
is the only one.
And that's the one you saw. Where it went.
That's top left.
Yeah. And that
These other profiles, they're going to be
these other
public
piles are
streets. They'll be
public
maintained
streets.
Publicly.
Yeah. So I hope I'm answering. These other ones are already in place. This is a new one they want to propose to go. And I think they even say where they want to put it. It's on the Groves Parkway. There's going to be parts of the Groves Parkway that they want this design to be accepted. And Public Works has reviewed it and they're fine with it. And this is just, if I were to cut that road and open it up and show, that's all. It's like a cross section.
Yep, that's what I needed.
And that's what it looks like. If you were just to stand in a 4-foot hole dip and just walk across it, you could say, okay, here's how it looks from here to here, instead of just standing across the street and trying to look at it. That's all this
And I
does
think
for
part
you.
of that actually is driven from council discussion, especially with that trail. I think that was something that the council told them we would like to see as part of that. And I'm not going to say that's what's driven this whole thing, but I think it's part of what's driven it.
And this is what we like to see in PCDs. That they're kind of unique. It's not the standard regular zoning. This is why we have a lot of give and take with them when we let them bring these. They're still the master developers. It's still a lot of their property. I know people have bought in, but again, markets change. It's just like, I don't want to, like the Brigham's Playhouse thing is if it didn't change, you wouldn't be given the money. And, we talked about that. So welcome to city government, I guess is the best way to say it, that changes happen. And that's why we have these, that's why you sit here and half your meetings are taken up by me, and you'll get used to that because of the different things that change within the city, because of markets change, things change. Even Stookie Farms went to bigger lots. And that's why I say they started going with what their density was. And I'll have his Brandy, are you here? Just say yes or no. Brandy can probably come up. The proposal, from what I understand, is she did the math on it, is that even with these, because of all the subdivisions that have been approved, their density is lower than what it was planned for. Again, those homes that are already up there. And so they've in essence, they're banking is what, you could look at it that way. It's just trying to use an analogy that, hey, we actually got approved for 3,800 and some odd units, and we're already not even getting, we're the ones that we've already done are not hitting their marks to be up there. So in essence, we're not going to be adding to you. We just wanted to change them in a different form. And that's where a lot of them will come in and do that. So far, Sienna Hills, they're under still what their market, what their approval was. They're not going to probably hit their density as overall PCD. I think Coral Canyons is going to be close, but it will probably still come in under, so all of these PCDs, even though you're seeing higher density things there, a lot of them really aren't going over their original approval target number.
Sienna Hills is probably going to come in under not just a few units, but
quite a few hundreds.
So it's tough to get them laid out to where you actually meet the density that's been granted. So.
And so if I start seeing a trend of it being, yeah.
What, 12 years?
Sienna Hills.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, it was there,
PCD
but I've been here for
created
12 years and it
probably
was,
12 or 15 years
it's-
ago. So,
yeah.
I mean, that's when you're creating it with a vision. And so you have to have some flexibility.
Or are we looking with, as we go more to PCD, are we looking for a greater struggle with current residents not being well informed with the changes that might be
Well, you
possible
always
there?
have that with both situations that my experience has been. Some that densities go tighter or bigger and they, some of them say, hey, I don't want a 2-story house behind me, that suddenly the design changes. I mean, there's lots of different things that drive different things. So, yeah, you'll get plenty of experience
The
with it.
past public hearings for Stuckey Farms, when they have adjusted the densities, is for the most part, local residents have been pretty supportive because they've had a good relationship and been happy with the way the project's been put together.
Is the homeowners association is tied to this, or is that optional for the community?
Well, a lot of PCDs, and I hate to use Sienna Hills and Coral Canyon because they're Sitla projects. So they always hold on to the reins no matter what. Even though Coral Canyon's been sold outright, Sitla still has reins on it. That was part of the agreement that they still oversee because it's still their property. If you're familiar with Coral Canyon, each one of those lots, when it sells, it's actually Sitla owned, and they get paid for each one of those as it goes. And Sienna Hills is becoming that as well. So they still hold their hands and, on the reins of both.
So they
those.
required
Now,
that in order to make sure that the project stayed high value.
they
until
want to
they
make sure
sold
that's
completely out.
exactly right. And then
Does that go away once they've sold out?
it all depends on how the makeup is with how they wrote their
What they're
HOA and their
required.
CCR. Yeah. I'm not sure how Stuckey right now is still over the master developer has the reins on that one because they still own the majority of the whole development. And so I'm sure they still have the reins on all that. So, but that one I'm not sure because we haven't even hit the tipping point. Usually it comes around 50, 55 or 60%. Depends on how they write the CCNRs. As soon as 55, 50%, it's all written up. As soon as it changes, then it goes. Then they have to start electing their own boards for a lot of subdivisions. But each one's different. And we keep our nose out of them because the state tells us to on CCNRs, et cetera. Just a little. So, if I may, the Planning Commission reviewed this request at their January 3rd, 2018 meeting. They unanimously recommended approval of Z-18-01 for the zone change request, amending portions of the Stuckey Farm PCD project plan onto you, the city council, based on the findings and subject to the conditions. And they're basically the same conditions that are in the report. I just made them specifically. Here's what's happening there. And your exhibits reflect that. So if you have any more questions, please feel free before we go into the public hearing.
Thank you. What you informed me on tonight was very helpful. I appreciate the advice.
Any other questions for Drew or for the applicant? If not, this is a public hearing. We welcome any other additional comments or questions or concerns. Come on up and the council will not be voting on this project today. It'll be in 2 weeks, so 3 weeks, excuse me. That's right.
Good evening. My name's Rod Beatty. My wife and Beatty, B-E-T-I-T. Wife and I have been at Stuckey for about 3 years now. We were in the Meadows, first really fully developed section of the Stuckey development. We've enjoyed a pretty good relationship with the developer, and he's been pretty open about what he's intended to do along the way. So we've gone through several different changes, in the course of the last few years. Our gateway was not one of the ones that we felt good about, so we were here for all those discussions too, for the density and lack of open space that was being planned for that particular development. As we sat down with the developer to look at what he had in mind here, the medium high density for this area, it sounded pretty good. What he has in mind, as I understand it, and our particular Meadows area has an average of 3 homes per acre of land. As I understand it, this medium high allows 7 to 12 homes per acre. But he's not planning to go to the 12, he's planning to keep it closer to the 7. And the intention was to build some more affordable housing for basically starter homes for people who can't get them now here in the community. So generally, we're supportive of that. We think if that's the idea and that these are going to basically be two-story homes on a smaller footprint with a garage, and he's also got plans for storage for offsite, extra toys and things that people have, so that doesn't become clutter in the neighborhood. We're basically thinking that that's a pretty good plan. And there's enough of a buffer before where we're at and some of the other developed areas that we don't think that's an issue in terms of the effect on property value or anything relative to what we've invested into Stookie. And I guess the one concern we do have is if these are starter homes, young families, kids, I mean, where you fall in that 7 to 12 and what kind of green space you have for them to actually have kids outside, because they're going to be smaller homes, as a place to play and hang out and have some fun, is something that we would like to be sure is taken into consideration. As far as the church, what we understood, we're not LDS, but what we understood was it was being pulled out because there's going to be commercial development too close to that site that prohibits a church being put in that location, but that the developer said there would be one somewhere within the development as it moves forward and as becomes necessary to have that. And that said, we felt pretty good about it. As far as HOAs, I sit on an HOA board for Meadows, which just formed in November. We're at a point now where we can start to control our own destiny there. We've had 2 meetings, one in November. We had another one today. I brought this up with the other board members and some of the other owners that were there. There wasn't any pushback on it. I can't say there was a formal vote taken, but I didn't get anybody expressing concern about this at that meeting. So be happy to answer any questions, but it's my testimony.
I appreciate that input because it's good to hear from those residents that are part of the project and whatnot. So thank you for your.
We've been really happy with how Carl's handled this, and I know he's got quite a challenge on his hand, but it's a big project. So it's very good about talking to us about what the details are.
Can you elaborate on your concern about is it open spaces for kids? Is it just making sure that there's enough area for?
If it's too high a density, where are the kids going to go? In terms of because this is, I don't see the green space on this particular plat, but where are they going to play? Is there going to be designated areas for them to be able to go do something and, maybe a little.
He's just trying to get the density adjustment now, and then he'll have to come back
Right.
with the plat at a later
Right.
date, and that's when you'll be able to see it.
So that was our only concern, was that you're going to have starter families in there and they're going to bring a bunch of kids and just need to have some place to hang out.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I was going to indicate that depending on when you're here, the places they play is in the streets, and that's why they don't want us to put any traffic on it ever. So that usually is the complaint we get, is you're putting traffic on our street. Where are our kids going to play?
In the cul-de-sac.
That's right.
Anybody else? Oh, come on. Okay, if not, I'll entertain a motion to close this public hearing.
Mayor, seeing nobody else come forward, I'll make the motion. We close our public hearing.
I'll second it.
Motion and a second.
Ward, aye.
Clough, aye.
Granger, aye.
Bellis, 9.
Turek, guy.
Thank you. 3 weeks. Come back and enjoy the fun. Item 10, ordinances. Consideration to approve an ordinance approving a general plan amendment G-17-07 to the land use designation from high density residential, medium density residential, low density, residential, to planned unit development, commercial PUD-C, located approximately 600 north, 1100 east, applicant Kendall Turner.
Mayor, I apologize for that tongue twister. It's a hard one to do all 3 of those. As stated, this was a request to change to the PUD commercial. I won't even try to go through the 3. The mayor just did our residential densities there. The 2-week holdover period is completed. The item's now ready for council action. Just to remind you, staff does not feel it's appropriate the location again for storage units. That was mine, but the planning commission held their public hearing December 6th. Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of the amendment to the general plan land use map from high density, medium density, and low density residential to the proposed planned unit development commercial. general plan designation as found in our general plan. And that is what is before you tonight. Yeah, I'll be glad to answer any questions you've had any over the past 2 weeks from the public hearing.
How does this proposed change merge with adjoining properties? Is it within some recommended, like, I know it is commercial and everything, but would it fit well within the densities of properties that we have? I've gone out and I've driven it. I've got a couple of interesting emails, pro and for, and some against. My concern is overall, how does it fit within our general plan? Does that seem appropriate for the area?
Well,
Maybe
what
that's
he's
not.
asking is to change the general.
And I maybe we need our magic 8 ball here and shake it. Odds look
No,
good.
I expressed this a couple weeks ago. You know, it's residential in that area off 1100. I don't see. It's probably one of the few times that I'm not very supportive of commercial. Typically, I would be, but I just think it's a good neighborhood area that's building up as a neighborhood area, and I'd like to see it stay residential, even if it's a high-density residential where we know we have a lack of.
You know, and I really appreciate the discussion and your point of view and seeing where Turner's gone to try to make accommodations to widen the road and everything to make it easier for that transition. But I feel after going through it and thinking it through, I'm leaning more towards a lot of the concerns that you've had, Councilman Bellison, on this, that it just, I see me more and more push for a residential thing and fits more within a general plan to push for something more residential based and not commercial.
So I would just have it, the applicant, I don't have one for you. I failed to ask this question during the public hearing, so I apologize, but I guess the one question I wanted to ask and make sure you understood that by moving this into a PUD process, you invite some partners into your planning process, that was being your planning commissioners and your council members, that then start to become your partners here in helping you design things the way they help, and it becomes a mixing process with it. I just want to make sure you understand that suddenly you've invited some partners into the bedroom with you.
Right.
Okay with that? Okay.
Any other questions for Kendall? Thank you, Kendall.
How far away is commercial property to the north as far as the zoning sits right now? We're
Up around the corner.
I think it's closer than that, either on the general plan or one of them has it closer than that.
You wanted the zoning, you said? That's right. So the piece in question is basically right here. Then you can see the red is commercial, and this is, up by the Maverick and the new soon-to-be Blackbeard Diner up there. And then everything down here on Telegraph, you can see it in the red is commercial. So it's, like I say, this is the piece we're talking about roughly right here. Then you can see where those red areas are.
Will you throw up the general plan just for my memory?
Now, again, the red and dark red are the general plan designated properties. Most of them are already zoned that way, but again, the property we're talking about is right here. And then these are, the light red is called community commercial, the dark red is called regional commercial, which is your big box type. And that's up on that development up there by, again, with Maverick. That are the darker red.
Any other discussion? Anybody want to take a stab at a motion?
Mayor, I'll make the motion that we approve an ordinance approving a general plan amendment G-1707 to change the land use designation from those that are listed to a PUD commercial.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second.
Turek, aye.
Belliston, nay.
Ranger, nay.
Huff, nay.
Join the PUD development. Board nay.
Okay, that's not approved. 4-1. That motion.
Say, some of the same concerns that we saw last time we saw this project regarding the road, the narrow road, and kind of traffic proposed on that. RVs, big RVs. So I don't know that we've discovered a solution to that yet.
Well, the one thing you're looking at, and of course, he's been very forthright what's coming forward, but there again, your general planning at this point. As we stated before, I mean, a lot of those things, at least I look at, we get into in the zoning process, especially in a PUD.
I understand.
We get into the zoning process.
But we're encouraging
Yeah. No,
that
I
direction.
certainly hear what you're saying, and I won't disagree with you.
If it was split between PD residential with some commercial up front or, whatnot, I think it's probably.
Well, the thing you have to remember too is you've already changed the portion next to it to high density residential for him right there. So you've given a chunk of high density residential right adjacent to it previously.
Peace. So with that, improving that high density thing, one of the questions I have with RV storage, do you think it's going to be a high trafficked area? I mean, when you're saying you're going to put a lot of traffic on the street, I think what we're offsetting that with is the fact that it's going to make it safer down there getting onto Telegraph with what we've chosen to willing to do. But that's not a high trafficked.
Yeah, my concern isn't necessarily high traffic so much as the kind of traffic.
That's correct. Most of, and I will say this, most of it would be coming off of I-15 by the Maverick and around there and taking off. Most of it's not going to be going down that direction. I'm not saying it's not going to be coming up, but there's already a traffic going up there as well.
Yeah, the concern, and I can see your point with the concern with that, especially if we're going to put high density residential, you're going to put that many more residential cars into that now competing with RV traffic, and they're on a much narrower road. So you really have compounded the problem, in my opinion.
I looked at it hoping that we could put a circle or something where they could turn and not come down that road, but none of that worked because there's no other access or egress for the people that live there. And so, yeah, I was thinking, well, maybe there's a solution. They just can't go on that road, but that solution's not available to us. So,
Are you proposing to modify the road?
I'm not. We've modified it up there where that project would be going. It was modified back when Bluffview.
Down at Expand. The concern when it was denied a few months ago was down towards 1100, bringing in the larger traffic, and then that down towards 1100, closer to Telegraph, pardon me, gets pretty tight. And what was requested then was basically to improve that east property line of the turf farm, which is a huge expense for them to have to deal with. And I mean, it didn't make much sense, and I understand why they wouldn't want to do it. They've already improved that section, and that's what they're looking at developing.
We don't have the roads here, but what is planned for that road long-term by the city?
That is the width right there.
That's it?
You can actually,
The upper section is the width, or are they the same?
best place to show what the width's gonna be.
Because you've got full build out on both sides.
Completely built yet. It's kind of fun. We have.
You can see the right of way. You can see the right of way line though on it there.
Yeah, you can see that black line.
at your right of way lines there.
Okay. And that would eventually go all the way to Telegraph that way?
Yes.
It goes up, but does it go down
Goes
to
to
the
Telegraph.
Telegraph?
It
Yeah.
ties through to Telegraph.
Eventually, yeah, as it builds out.
I'd be interested just to have you walk me through your thinking of the project, and I haven't been involved with it, and you're
Well, the idea was we'd like to start with RV storage. I mean, again, we've talked about partnering with the city, allowing oversight. Not that you guys don't have too much already, but we're
allowing
allow
what
that.
again? I'm sorry.
What's
Part
that?
of the PUD process, he's saying.
Oh,
allow
I
us
see.
to be part of his partnership.
Anyway, we're willing to do that. Like I said, we'd have a turn-in lane up there into the RV facility, and widen down there at Telegraph to the full width there to make it a safer. You think about it, if you guys are worried about it being unsafe right now, if this doesn't get approved, I'm not trying to say you guys do what you're going to do, but we're trying to help. I mean, that's without that, it's going to be a little bit difficult, and it's going to be a long time before, would try to do something different. So
Elaborate on that. When you say you're trying to help, finish making your case there for me.
back down there at Telegraph, widening it to the full lane. So as the people are coming down and turning off of Telegraph up 1100 or coming down, that would be fully improved to 100 feet and then kind of taper up to 180 feet. According to the Public Works, that's kind of, in one of the meetings, that's kind of what we was talking about.
Basically, just that last bit would be
As it
improved.
comes on the Telegraph, it'd be widened, right? As it comes in, turn lane.
Another situation, maybe you guys aren't aware, but and again, I realize that it's you're talking about location, but the city has a big problem with people parking on the streets. We probably get a couple of people a day coming to want to store things because there is no parking. I mean, they're getting tickets for parking on the road. We're trying to help solve a problem that the city has or created. I mean, or people has created in the city. Where we own property all the way around, what we feel we're trying to do. I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to think the way you guys think, but we're trying to solve a problem, not create more.
Any questions? Anybody?
I do. I just struggle with the mixed, with the houses that are, people are already there, the zoning is in place. I think there's ways to mitigate the look of, RV parking, and I appreciate your thoughts on parking and adding that to the city.
To help with that thought too. So that's why we created that buffer between the RV parking and to the north of Bluffview would eventually be some apartment housing. Going to take that away. Our farm is the border on the south. Now out there on 1100 East, it starts out probably at about a 8 to 9 foot bank right there, which obviously would be landscaped or, terraced, whatever. You wouldn't even see into there unless you're coming down off of the hill for a good part of it. Most 1100 until you get above that rest home there on the east side, you wouldn't even be seeing it because it'd be behind a block wall for one.
Let me ask you a couple of questions. What's been described to me is that basically you just want to do essentially the whole 10 acres as an open air RV. Is that correct?
Well, there's 15 acres, yeah, on that parcel there, yes.
Well, that's what I'm seeing is 10.44.
Yeah, that's correct.
Acres.
Yep.
I struggle with that, given the one on Telegraph. I think if you were moving the one from Telegraph up, that's one conversation to have, but it's an addition to.
Are you
That's
telling me
why I
it's an
struggle with
eyesore? I guess what I'm trying to ask, are you saying it's an eyesore? I mean, it's,
Well, I'm not saying that.
okay.
I don't know that I would have done it the same way. That's
My
definitely
dad's the one that done it. He's the one that created it. I've straightened it up quite a bit, honestly. I mean, it's, what he had, it wasn't designed for RV storage in the beginning. It was going to be storage units all the way across.
Yeah.
And that was an afterthought. And then, anyway, if it would have been designed,
Well, and it grew inside you a
beginning.
couple of years ago too.
that's correct.
Yeah, I just, the thing I've struggled with is you got housing in the north. I understand there's commercial in the north, but there's housing in the north, there's housing to the east, there's housing to the west. I just think it's a good.
There is buffers on the
Now,
west
if you wanted
side.
to do a split of it, or, some small, you said you have requests for people to come in and do housing. You're not proposing that you're gonna do small residential housing.
In that 5 acre to the north?
Well, that's the one we just did for high density residential.
Yeah, to the north there, between us and Bluffview.
So now you're saying you don't want to do high density residential?
No,
there
that's,
either.
that's still the plan. We'd like to start with this RV storage, and then that would be following this. And then the commercial buildings out front would be, and that's the other thing, there'd be some commercial buildings on the front of this to kind of buffer that as well. Along 1100.
See, that's kind of the vision that I had with it, that the front piece, as far as your road view, would actually be commercial buildings.
Mhm.
That behind those buildings then become your RV storage. So you're probably, in all reality, at least the way I see it, very minimal visibility, if any. Probably more coming from the south north. You could see that block wall. You may see something behind it. But other than that, you're going to see basically a row of commercial buildings, in my opinion. That's why I asked you if you want to be my bed partner.
That's the part where I was just clarifying and seeing more and more of why you're articulating that, because I think that's a lot of the shared council's concern.
So that's why I wanted him to know that I have a plan here if he wants to be my partner. That's why I asked if I was invited in.
And I agreed.
You have a plan.
Well, just that idea of that would be, no, I haven't planned it for him.
That-
But my thought is exactly that anything against that road is a commercial building. Certainly we'd have to have an access to get back into the storage through somewhere there, but basically it's simply an access and everything else lies behind that.
Yeah.
That's just early thoughts on it. I mean, it'd be interesting to see how he lays it out and what it comes, and, we get into where we become part of the design partner with what comes forwards.
Well, and if we see what it's like to have that kind of storage next to homes, all we have to do is drive down Telegraph. We can see what that looks like.
Correct. The thing you've got with this, you've got a block wall that's going to be around it. His homes that buffer are his homes he's building. His homes behind it are his homes that he and his
That we're
families.
living in.
And so he really surrounds himself with his own property. And that's kind of what I get into and say, it really doesn't affect anybody else other than maybe those homes to the east across 1100, your Pine Valley townhomes and those multifamily homes across to the east. Other than that, he's only affecting himself.
Well,
with what
and
his-
that's
what his proposal
the
is.
only part, I agree with you 99%, but it's we all get buried under dirt sooner or later. And that's the overall integrity of the city that I side with Belliston on, Councilman Belliston, is does this really fit within the general plan? Because we're asking for a change from that. The concepts have been discussed tonight have really helped me understand better possibilities, don't get me wrong, but I'm trying to be respectful to the city as a whole in its existence. And that's what's been difficult for me, because I understand what's at stake right now. Obviously, you're your only neighbor and you're taking the hit on this, and it is your property. So you got 99% of why not?
Well,
But
this
it is that.
for new council members, I mean, he came through previous to this for straight zoning. He came through the general plan straight zone. And he kind of got more so from the planning commission to council to say, why don't you come through with a PUD? Because then we get to be a part of Well, we're a little afraid to give you straight zoning,
Exactly why we
but
created the PD.
Exactly.
Don't get me wrong.
exactly. So, we're afraid what we're going to get if we straight zone you. We are going to get a chain link fence storage unit in here.
Right.
And so that's why he was encouraged to come back with what he's come back with was somewhat from our planning commission members, from what I understand, saying, you know what? We want to be a part of the process here to make sure really what gets in there kind of blends in a little bit with what we want to see the future become.
Well,
You about to make a
I'll give
motion
you
or?
a second bite at
can
the
I-
apple. I'll make a motion and we strike down our prior vote.
Well, so
And since I voted against it, I can second that motion.
So what you would say is you'd make your motion.
Wasn't approved.
So you can make another just make another motion for whatever you.
Oh, I thought it was.
We voted it, that we didn't approve it, so you either need to vote to disprove it or bring back another motion to approve it again.
Well, can I just, before we go into that, so I guess I'm looking at this from a community design standpoint, and I'm trying to weigh out how that flows into the future as far as a sustainable community that's safe and vibrant, and people like and love living there to the point that they maintain their properties. But also,
He's going to give you the best opportunity to keep some handle on that.
well, so I'm intending to throw a couple things out just to get some bounce back. So I appreciate that. And then the other thing is that we have had some citizens address the safety and concern of that. You don't know. You've got the large vehicles moving in and out through residential areas, and you don't necessarily know what commercial is going to come in there. And what? Say again. Yeah.
Certainly, it's still.
Big vehicles.
So those are, but so the PUD doesn't, while I appreciate it and I almost look forward to maybe working through that, it doesn't mitigate either of, I guess it partially mitigates the first, but it doesn't fully mitigate the second. And so I'm kind of saying that out loud. If somebody wants to respond to that and help me process that.
Can I ask a question just based upon what Councilman Turk said, because I got confused for a minute. The general plan amendment right now, the general plan designation right now is high density residential, medium density residential, and low density residential. Councilman Turk mentioned something, if you go straight zoning, that you'll get the chain link fence.
Well,
But do any of these zones allow for an RV storage?
No, he's saying he came through with his previous proposal to change the general plan to the commercial, to the community commercial.
Oh, okay.
That was the previous one that we started down the path. Was that change.
I was just confused.
No, not what's their existing. No, I understand.
We know what your point was, is that, it has less.
It was just a point.
It's just a point.
So we got no motion on the table.
Correct.
Okay, I'll test out your theory. Make a motion, we approve an ordinance approving a general plan amendment G-17-07, the land use designation from high density residential, medium density residential, and low density residential to PUD commercial located approximately 600 north, 1100 east.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second.
Turek, aye.
I'd still rather see residential, but I'll Bellis and I.
I'm still concerned about big vehicles on a small road. We haven't resolved it, and I'm still an A.
After addressing the needs of how this will better merge with the adjoining densities and considering we'll have new people discussing how this will be filled out. Clough, aye.
Okay, I guess it doesn't really matter what I vote because it's passed. So Ward nay.
It always matters because somebody will hold it up someday and say, you voted either for or against that.
At which point I won't remember.
All right, that does pass officially 3-2. Thank you, Kendall. Item 11, finance, presentation of the second quarter budget review. Kimberly.
Mayor, Council, thank you. I'm grateful for this opportunity to come before you this evening and to review the budget status of the city through the end of the second quarter. In your packets, you should have received a detailed budget status report as well as my executive summary. Kind of gives you an outline of where we're at. Tonight, we will be reviewing the budget information at a high summary level. So I did want to take a minute and just point out to any of our residents that are here tonight or might be watching from our live feed that all the information that we're going to go over and cover is available in more detail on all the way down to the transaction level on the city's financial dashboard that is accessible from the city website. So, turn on Apple TV really quick. Okay. Okay, so as I mentioned, what we're doing is covering the second quarter, and this covers July through December of 2017 for the city. It brings us to the halfway mark for our fiscal year. A couple of the highlights that occurred and where we're at for the second quarter is it's basically been a strong first half of the year for the city, and through December we've collected 55% of our budgeted revenue, and we have spent just over 40% of the budget at this point. Last year during the same time period, we had collected about 48% of revenue and spent about 54% of our year-end actuals. So we're a little bit up in revenue if we were comparing it to last year, and a little bit down in our expenses. For our revenue, it's our growth-related revenue and consumer spending that's the driving force behind the increase. As you guys are aware, by everything that comes to you every couple of weeks, we have a lot of land development that is taking place within the city. And as a result of that, the building portion of our revenues have been coming in quite strong. As a matter of fact, most of those types of revenues are almost at 100% of what we had originally anticipated collecting for the year. And then again, consumer spending. There's a lot of consumer confidence out there. We have, again, as the county continues to grow, it brings more people to shop in Washington City as well. And with that, then we have received an increase in our sales tax collections. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into detail. So the reduced spending, though, in terms of being at 40% of the budget so far, it's mostly related to capital outlay items and the timing of those projects. But our current year operating expenses, if we were to look at them separately, we're about 53% of the year and on target for finishing off the year in line with what the budget is. A couple of noted transactions that took place last quarter is we did purchase a new bucket truck for the power department. And then the council also authorized funding to replace 6 vehicles in the police department as part of the fleet replacement model. So on the screen, this particular one here, what it is it's just displaying a summary of the city's budget as a whole. And then when we are looking at our stuff, the things that we like to compare to is you'll see how we're doing year to date for the current fiscal year compared to a couple of prior fiscal years. And then it looks at the budget. And as I had mentioned there with on this particular chart, it shows basically the opposite percentage for what I note. It shows you on revenue what we still need to collect. In my report, I talk about what we've already collected. On the expense side, I talk about what we have spent. And on the variance, it's telling you what's left to spend in the budget. So if you're just looking at those variance columns for some clarification there as you're reviewing that. So where did the money come from that we have collected so far this year? This chart just shows our revenue coming in as in major revenue categories. So 76% of the revenue that we've collected year to date is basically derived from 3 primary sources. 39% of it is revenues that come from enterprise funds, which would be user and rate charges associated with providing those services such as water, power, sewer. Then 21% is tax calculation, tax generations that we've had. And basically at this point, this would include all of our sales tax, property taxes, including the property tax for the Coral Canyon Special Service District. And those taxes come in for property taxes. The bulk of our distribution comes in December. So at this point, in terms of our property tax collections, we've received about 87% of the anticipated revenue associated with property taxes. Again, it just has to do with, it's an annual billing that you guys are all aware of since we all pay those types of services. The other major function or source is basically special fund revenue, which is impact fees and interest earned on impact fees. And again, it's a large source. It's where our collections year to date are higher than we originally anticipated. And again, because those are strictly revenue driven based off of growth. So money only comes in as building permits are pulled or as subdivisions are recorded.
And could you clarify? I'm sorry, I was following that. The impact fees are in which one? of
The
those?
special revenue fund.
Thank you.
The special fund revenues, excuse me, because we actually have a special revenue fund, so it gets a little tricky. But yeah, special fund revenues, that is strictly comprised of impact fees and then the interest that is earned off those impact fees because they are restricted for the same purpose. Okay, and so then what we'll do is we'll just take a little look at a revenue and how it's actually comparing. So revenue collections for the enterprise fund, and what I'll do is I'll just kind of go down in order of the way it's displaying here on the table that we're looking at. And as I mentioned, what we're looking at is July through December. And the first column would let you look at the actuals for 2016, 2017, and then where we are for our current year budget, the 2018, what the budget amount is, and then the variances between those budgets. So revenue collections for the enterprise funds are above the year-to-date budget by 5%. And so the difference between this budget that you're seeing, and I probably should have covered that a little bit in the beginning just for some clarification, but when we review budget information and budget data, you'll typically see it presented in two different methods. You'll either see year-to-date totals, that's what we're looking at right now, so we're looking at July through December. The other format that you might see it in would be an incremental amount, which means we'd be only looking at just a single period, okay, just 1 month's worth of information. And then we take that and we compare it to either the budget as a whole for the whole year or what we call a year-to-date budget. And a year-to-date budget, and that's what we're seeing on this particular report here, is it means it's taken the entire budget and it divides it linearly by the number of months that have passed in the budget. So what it allows us to do is say, well, 6 months of the year has passed. We would expect, this much money to have come in. How are we comparing to that? And so on the variance there, it's not a variance of the total budget. It's a variance of the 6-month period at a look back there. And so basically for the enterprise funds, as I had mentioned, we are above year-to-date expectations for about 5%. And the driving factor for that is impact fees that are collected in the enterprise funds as well. So there's 2 different locations, depends if it's a governmental or an enterprise fund. The previous slide, we were looking at revenue categories. Now we're looking at funds that they're collected in, okay? And so we have impact fee collections that we talked about that are up because of growth, and then operational revenues. If we were to look at those separately right now, they're reporting about 2% below our year-to-date budget. But this is to be expected timing-wise for the city if we were to go back and compare it to prior years. The driving reason behind that is that user fees is the major source of enterprise revenue, and usage, because of the billing factor, reports about 1 month in the rear. And so when we hit June, you'll see 2 months worth of revenue that will get allocated into that service. And so it just, instead of having 6 months worth of revenue for those types of funds, we're really only looking at 5. So it just throws that off a little bit. But through the end of the second quarter, I am anticipating that the enterprise revenues related to charges and services and user fees, that they will all come in as expected on budget. We're not expecting any shortfalls at all in our revenue resources at this point. I did just want to note too that compared to last year, in most instances, the user fees collections are up over last year. Again, it's growth related. We have more residents moving in. We have more service connections and so forth. There are 2 funds that are reporting collections less than last year. One of those is the sewer fund. The reason behind that, if you'll recall, at the latter part of last year, we actually did a rate reduction in the sewer department. And so that is the cause that basically for the remainder of this fiscal year, as we go back and look at prior comparisons, you will see that coming in below prior years because we actually reduced rates in that fund. Okay, and then the other one is our irrigation fund, and it's like $380, but it comes out to about 4% of their revenue because it's such a small division, and it just is based on users, water users within the irrigation fund along that line. Okay, so for the general fund, our sales tax collections are up about 12% through December compared to prior year. The total general fund revenue, we've collected about 52% of our budget for the year. On that, as I mentioned, we've collected 87% of our property taxes so far, and I think those were things I'd mentioned a little bit before as well, that we're, in most instances in the general fund, all of our growth related, which is building permits, subdivision plat reviews, and those types of things, we've pretty much actually collected 100% of what we had anticipated, which means we will have additional revenue that will continue to come in through the remainder of the year, depending upon the growth rate. Will determine what revenues would be available to be appropriated towards other uses. So.
Made some changes recently in collections for utilities. Have we seen more less utilities in arrears? Have we seen?
You know what? I'm not positive on what their shut-off listing is at this point, but we could get.
Very good question, and we'll have we'll put down our note, have Carrie come in and update you on that, or maybe you can send it out.
Okay.
That's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
Which I will say though, this much on that issue, you know, it was a tough transition for those who find themselves in that boat. Okay, especially at first, and we're not hearing. I don't get any pushback now. So I mean, it's become the new norm for them, which in and of itself is probably positive. But we'll ask Carrie to get a memo out on what it actually is meant as far as a reduced arrears.
And with the reduced arrears, can we know how many incidences of power shutoff we're talking about within the city? Is that?
Yeah, we probably have, Kimberly, you know what we do approximately a month anymore?
Well, I know what it used to be, but since they switched over to their new program, that I'm not familiar with what types of numbers they're having on their disconnect list.
I do know when the new program. Now again, you got to kind of separate what actually gets disconnected to what disconnect notices go out. I would say you're referring to the first, the actual disconnects, because a lot of people have disconnect, not a lot, but you'll have more that have disconnect notices that sometimes they just say, oh my goodness, and they come in and take care of it. So it's really the disconnects, I think, are the key indicator. I think we got, I don't think I'll speculate on that, but I did know it went up for those first few months that came into place. But you know, the goal will be that it goes down. But I think that we're probably hovering somewhere around 100.
Yeah, I'd like to see if our collections have gone up. How many people are affected? Sure, that's good information for us.
I do know that actual write-offs that we do are less than 1% of build-out revenues for those services.
I know for the first time in my life, I got a disconnect notice.
If you'd stay in town and quit going on vacation.
No, it had to do with I do an automatic pay, and apparently it was coming out a day late, and those notices were right on my doorstep. That's a first in my life.
I get plenty of them.
Okay, now that we got two confessions. All right. No, so in my case, I do things by draws, and so anything that I'm doing in Washington goes in a draw. So I'll get it. It used to be a couple of months, and it's not a big deal. But if I get something on the first, it doesn't go into draw until the next month, and so that I get them all the time. Unfortunately.
So I will say that a good portion of our disconnects, and this has always been historically, are really chronic disconnects. So probably more Councilman Belliston than Councilwoman Granger.
I would think so.
There are others.
But yes, we do have a good portion, or a lot of times just our chronic kind of late payers. And we have great policies in place that we reach out. We work well, I think, with them. We have appeals processes internally. And so, but we'll get you those numbers.
No, I would have to say, just as experiencing different than the other two options, I think our staff have been very kind when it's not those scenarios. And I appreciate that. And so getting these numbers would be great, but also just giving a little bit of kudos to the staff. I think you guys do a great job.
They were kind to me.
Were they? Well, you just worry about most people's interface with government is negative. You know, I mean, you're only talking to the government. Yeah, and you're having a rough time. And I love the idea of the threat of the stick, but when it actually comes down, it's, you know.
So let me just give you an example. Let me just give you an example of how we deal with this typically. If somebody has a particular concern, the first level they'll go to is our city treasurer, who's their utility billing officer. And he's very good about trying to work things out, because ultimately our goal is to collect. Our goal is not to disconnect, our goal is to collect. And but if they disagree with him, then I'm the hearing officer by statute. And anytime the council wants to change that, I'm always willing to do that. But honestly, it doesn't happen a lot. But they come to me and they say, these are the issues. And in most cases, under the ordinance, I have the authority to adjust if there's been a billing error, if there's meter read problems, because sometimes meters go bad. And we have processes by which we go through. Ultimately, they can always come. You represent what I'd call the Board of Equalization, which if it's just simply, I can't pay, and I just think it needs to be removed, then this is the board right here that only has the authority to do that. Again, we have the authority to, if there's errors, to fix it. Councilman Turk could probably answer how many times you've ever had anybody come here as a Board of Equalization. That's what I remember too, is just one. And but we'll do things like if they'll work with us.
Can or not.
Well, yeah, I'm not talking about blue can. I'm not talking about
My first assignment.
With the blue can?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, the appeals process, the blue can.
So we, for instance, one of the things we'll do is we may set up an arrangement with them and say, okay, you're behind, and so we'll give you, what do you think you can do? And if it's reasonable, we'll agree to it. But we hold them accountable. The minute they say, I agree to do 6 months or 8 months or whatever, and again, a lot of times these are chronic payers, the minute they get to month 2 and are not honorable with that thing, it's off. I mean, and you know what? We also find that in most cases, they'll figure it out. And it's important.
I think there are some resources in the area. I just also worry that the people who are proactive enough to go enlist help from government are probably not the ones who are getting in the most trouble with paying their bills anyways. It's the ones who don't know the resources and don't know how to, anyways, and
that is a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. So HEAT, we often refer them to HEAT, great
5 County has some programs for seniors.
5 County, we actually get about especially around Christmas time, we will get donations by people that just say, hey, I think we have a gentleman that comes in every year and drops $1,000 down and says, just use this to help people who have utility bill problems.
Oh, wow.
And we administer that. We let the treasurer kind of administer that. And I think we do okay. We have good rate payers.
Then we have a third level.
Send them to the mayor.
Yeah, I get them.
Well,
But it's
speaking
good.
of
But it's good.
payments, right? Speaking on payments, we have our debt service funds. And we have 3 debt service funds within the city. One is the Coral Canyon Special Service District, the Municipal Building Authority, and then we have what's called just a general debt service fund that houses our sales tax bonds and to that nature. So for those, the only one that is a generator of its own revenue is the Coral Canyon Special Service District. It is a separate district. It's actually a separate taxing entity. We call it a blended component unit because the board is basically you, which is the same as the city. So we report it as a blended component unit under the city's financials, but the city itself is under no financial obligation to maintain the district. Okay, it has its own taxing powers. We set a separate property tax rate. And that is where it only applies to the boundaries within the district, and that is where the revenues come to pay the debt associated with that, with the infrastructure that went in place out to Coral Canyon, that development. With the other two funds, the revenue resources basically transfers in. So with the Municipal Building Authority, that one houses the Sullivan Park, it houses the community center, and it houses the police department. Those are the three outstanding debt items that we have within those funds. And the community center and the Sullivan Park are funded 100% by impact fees. That's what covers those debt service payments. On the police station, it's like a 60-30 split. I can't think of the exact percentage off the top of my head, but it's only 30% about of it is impact fee eligible, and the rest is covered from basically general revenues within the general fund. It gets transferred to make those debt service payments. So because of that, the revenue correlates directly to when the payments are made. Principal payments come once a year, interest payments come twice in our fiscal year. And by the time we hit December, we've made our principal payments for the year. And so as a whole, those debt service funds have collected about 90% of their revenue because we've spent about 90% of our expenses on the flip side, because of the bulk of your payments are basically the principal portion, and all we'll have left is an interest payment. So it's normal that you'll see those ones out of line if you're trying to line them up linearly within a budget. The next item that we have is our capital projects. These capital project funds here are only governmental capital projects, which means streets, leisure services. Our general capital project one, I can't think of what that goes to. It was originally used to fund like the monies associated with I can't think of what that was for.
I was going to say.
I know.
I've never seen that.
Welcome to day 2 and semester 2. So coming before you guys, and I apologize, but anyway, doesn't matter. It's governmental related capital projects. On our enterprise related, they are actually accounted for in the enterprise funds themselves. So like the big substation project that's taking place, you'll see it encapsulated within the actual power department's regular costs. For governmental accounting, the reason that they're accounted for separately is because of the restrictions on fund balance that are held in the general fund. We're only allowed to have 25% fund balance reserves, and obviously capital projects are large items and they're ongoing, and so the state legislatures allowed these types of funds that let us bank reserves in order to fund capital resources that are related to government type services. In terms of the basic explanation there. Okay, our internal service funds that we have, this is our fleet. This is our fleet division that we have that sits there. It is reporting behind budget at this point. So it's 13% behind the year-to-date budget, where we'd expect it to be year-to-date. In terms of the overall budget, we've collected 43%. We would have expected, 50% for the year. The fleet division, however, revenue is directly correlated to services. So they bill out the services they're performing to the city. So it's a reflection of basically less maintenance needs that are occurring right now on our fleet items. Part of that is going to be related to our new fire engine that we have. The old engine was in the shop quite a bit. And now because it's not on the road quite as much, then we're seeing some of those repairs and things like that lighten up. And we did do some substantial repairs last year too. But on the flip side, when we get to the expenditures, we'll see that their expenditures, are related to operations, and the fleet repairs are down as well. Okay, and then the last major fund category that we have is called Special Revenue Fund, not to be confused with actual special revenues. Okay, so a special revenue fund means that the revenues you're generated are restricted, like impact fees and to that nature, but they're designated to where they're used for only that purpose. And so what we have in there is the RAP tax. So the RAP tax is a fund. The money that comes in, it's not a tax on our level, it's a county-wide level. So when we receipt it in, it comes in as a contribution from the county. And it's accounted for in a separate fund called the RAP tax fund, which is a special revenue. And you guys covered that a bit tonight, so I think you're aware of where we are at funding-wise for the RAP tax. RAP tax, that fund revenue-wise will always report behind because tax revenues come in 2 months in the arrears, and that just has to do with the way that it's received and has to be processed at the state level, then distributed at the county level, and then distributed outwards. So it just takes a little time for the reporting on that. So basically, though, as a whole, as I had mentioned, that the total city revenues right now, we're above where we'd expect to be for halfway through the year. We have higher earnings at this point. We'll bring you in some more information regarding this in February. We have annually, we typically do a budget opening in February or March to be able to address where we, based on once the first 6 months have come in, where do we think we're going to be by the end of the fiscal year? And we bring that to the council to look at needs and where to appropriate those types of resources. Okay. So we talked about where the money came from. We're going to hit on where the money went. 82% of our year-to-date expenses are related to services that are provided by the general fund and the enterprise funds. Okay, so that, as I kind of go through this, we're going to kind of focus a little bit on that area because it's the bulk of basically what's going out. And the next slide that I have will show you, well, what does that mean? Okay, so we are still looking at total expenditures citywide, and this is showing it basically broke out by city function, or what type of services that are being produced. So 26% of our costs that we have spent out so far is related to the electric fund. So as you can see, that's about 5.8 million, but the most of it, 3.3 million of that, is direct costs associated with power purchase. Then there's another 1.2 million related to capital infrastructure costs that are coming from that source. The next, I just kind of noted the top 5. You can actually see all of the functions here that are available. I just made some notes on the top 5, but it's basically just the same thing that you're seeing there. The water fund makes up 12% of our expenditures year to date. Police and fire picks up 10%. Parks is 7.8%, and the general government functions are picking up about 7.4% of our expenditures that we have spent year to date from the city. And then we will just kind of do the comparison on that and look at them from the fund level, from a fund category level. So the enterprise funds, as we've kind of talked a little about, we're talking water, sewer, streets, irrigation, stormwater. These are the ones that run like a business in terms of accounting that we have. And they, let's see, let me get to my notes. The expenses for the enterprise funds are below the year-to-date budget by about 30%, but it's to be expected. Capital outlay expenses make up about 31% of these enterprise funds. And so the timing of the projects will vary greatly. And again, one of the things that we address mid-year is how are those projects coming? Are they going to actually finish out as we had originally anticipated, or will the budget not be spent this year and we need to make sure we appropriate it for these capital items in the next budget year? Let's see. I did a lot like the revenue side on the enterprise side, again, because we're dealing with billing and invoicing. With the expenses going out, a large part of your item is, as we talked about, purchasing power and then purchasing water from the Water Conservancy District. So with those types of purchases, the power billings run 2 months behind, and the water billings to the Conservancy District run 1 month behind. And so you will always see their expenses lag behind the budget. But again, this is something that this is why we also will look at prior year comparisons in terms of percentages to see if it looks like they're in line with historical spending and trending and that type of item. The general fund expenditures, we are on target at the end of the quarter. We're at 47% of budget, even though only 50% of the fiscal year has passed. And it's completely, again, normal under these circumstances. We have expenses that are, particularly in the general fund, we have certain items that might be considered one-time purchases that we like to hold off on in the general fund until we've made it through halfway through the year, which would be general fund related equipment purchases and some of those specific supplies that might be larger items. And again, the reason behind that is because the bulk of the revenue for the general fund comes from tax collections and stuff. We want to make sure that we are on target as a whole before we move forward with some of those one-time type funding items. And then pay increases on the staffing levels, they also don't happen until January. And the reason is for the same. You know, we've set that target date because we know that we'll have revenues to support what was originally projected within the budget before we move forward on rolling that out. So that's all been done now. And as we move through the year, you'll start to see the budgets start to normalize. Now, with the documents that you guys received, I did want to note out that there were a couple of individual divisions that we're watching right now that are over budget of where we would expect them to be. Those will be, some of those items are directly related to just, so for example, in the finance division, the bulk of our budget, because it's a small budget, the services are the annual audit, and the annual audit all happens at the first of the year. So the professional and technical budget has basically been spent out of that item. And so as again, the year goes on, then you'll see your percentages come in line with where you expect to be. As a whole, we expect those budgets to still finish out the year with what was originally budgeted. And as right now, the department heads are working on their year-end projections. We'll prepare anything that will come before you in February if we have any anticipated growth-related increases and things like that we'd like the council to consider. The debt service fund expenditures, we pretty much hit that already as we talked about the revenue, so I'm not going to touch on that anymore. Capital project expenditures are, and these would be the governmental side of items, and we're at 32% of the budget. The main capital project items that we had that come out of here, I should also point out, this is the location source where we collect impact fee revenues and disperse impact fee revenues for those governmental agencies, which would be street impact fee money, park impact fee money, the public safety impact fee money. They're accounted for in these capital project funds. And so on the expense side, you have transfers going out to cover debt service payments, as well as expenses that are directly related to projects that are going on. For the internal service fund expenditures, one of the items to note about that is the council did authorize our fleet rollover model a few months ago, or a month or so ago. I think that was in February. And so as part of that, we authorized the purchase of those 6 police vehicles, which will take place in the fleet fund. Some of those purchases have already started, but the actual budget appropriation, you won't see that until the February budget opening that comes place. The council authorized it in December, but we don't have the modification. We had the public hearing and so forth in that item. And then special revenue funds, which are the RAP tax that we talked about and that you guys look at in July and January of each year. We do expect our RAP tax collections by end of year to actually be above what we originally anticipated for budget. And again, that's just because of the strong growth we're seeing in sales tax at this time. Those RAP tax funds are restricted for recreation, arts, parks, zoological, botanical type stuff. So anything that we do receive in excess of the budget stays within that fund and just rolls over. So when I provide to you, like, so tonight when you guys looked at where were we at year to date, or what money is available to spend, the money available to spend is actually greater than the revenue we have collected this year. And it's because we had money we received last year that wasn't appropriated out for projects. Okay. And so each year when we do the budget, we try to budget to spend what we think we'll have on hand for the council to be able to appropriate when those come before them. So that is what I had prepared tonight on that budget review. If any of you have questions, and again, the information that goes out in your packet is a detailed budget status. It shows line item information. If you have any questions about individual budgets, because we did talk again on a higher level tonight, just don't hesitate to reach out and we will address any questions that you have.
Thank you. Any questions for Kimberly? Thank you very much.
Did you remember the fund that you forgot? Just curious. Now it's on my mind, like, not to point at the fly in the soup, but that was amazing. That was amazing.
Thank you. We'll move on to reports. Anything to report from your assigned committees?
I do.
Okay.
Active Transportation Committee is ready now to implement the plan that we reviewed with them. And part of that's perfunctory. That is the highways. They'll start to work on the things that they said they would. Part of it is they want to reform the committee, having maybe burned out the old committee, and I could use some names. So if you know some people that are active in bikes and trails and might be willing to serve on that committee, I need some names for them. Along with that is I also attended the Habitat Conservation Advisory Committee the next day in the audience, and then spoke to them and suggested that maybe someone from the tortoise habitat could serve on our committee, and maybe also somebody from BLM, and all of that in an attempt to see if we can't create some bike trails in the tortoise reserve that go up to the edge of the wilderness area that would allow people to hike in the wilderness area, because we can't put transportation stuff into the wilderness area. And I'm saying that because I'm hoping that the council is okay with my proceeding in that direction to try to
It's a great idea.
involve those people and get some interest in, you know, their motto, the ACAC motto is a place for people and wildlife. And I just will point out that people comes first, and it doesn't look like that's what we're doing.
I was gonna say, have you dealt with those people yet?
Well,
You'll find out.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not do a good turn daily.
So
And it's not people first.
I'm not totally hopeful, but I'm not hopeful, because they did go out of their way to talk to some people and invite some other people in that were in charge of the trails, and seemed to be respectful of my request that maybe we could work together on some of this. So I'll continue if you'll let me.
Absolutely.
So
Mayor, just
can I?
report- Oh, go ahead. Go
Well, I
ahead.
was going to clarify on a couple of things you said there. So just, it's a county committee, correct?
It is.
Or is, okay. And then the trails that you're looking at are not actually inside the Turtle Preserve. They're up to the preserve, or are you trying to actually see if you can get some trails inside the preserve?
Well, yeah, there are some, but they're not useful. And there's even a bike trail that's all sand, and it's not something a family could take their family out and go bike. And if we could, thank you for being here. Yeah, but if we could bike on a paved trail to the edge of where the wilderness area is up there, and then hike in there, but it's so far to walk up to where the beautiful canyons are. We just can't get there, and nobody does, and yet we have this incredible resource and we can't access it. And so the intent is to get us to bike, because we don't want cars going back up there either, and that's not going to happen anyway. They're trying to run those too close to our houses anyway, and so, which is another thing
story.
to talk about. Yeah. So anyway, so what I'm thinking now is let's get the bikes up to that edge, have a place to park the bikes, and then we could access those canyons. And you don't even have to have a trail to access the canyons. Just walk up the canyons, and they're absolutely beautiful. And so, okay.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Councilwoman gave me a great segue into my MPO report. Speaking of our northern corridor, there is some positive movement within the corridor. Of course, the mayor was there. Councilman Ward was in the audience there. We did allocate some funds to the county to begin some right-of-way acquisition in the preserve with the corridor. So there's some positive signs of maybe we might get a northern corridor someday. The only other thing I want to report is we did take official action as an MPO involving Washington City, moving our funds that were allocated to Merrill Road and move those to the Washington Parkway officially. So the Parkway has now got 2 allocations from the MPO onto it. We've taken those off of Merrill Road, which will fund internally.
The purpose of the Parkway is to great access for the northern corridor. Are they gonna pay for it?
Are they gonna pay for it?
We're only looking right now at doing 2 lanes.
Yeah, right now it's Washington City access.
Well, when you say are they pay, MPO has got like, what is it, almost $3 million. I think we've got programmed into that right now.
And are we making any progress on moving them a little bit away from those homes?
No, it became very, that they stay, I mean, their intrusion into the habitat is trying to be as minimal. They've tried to work with the biologists in there who kind of drew, you talked about it coming tighter to the homes. That's where it came in. They then got the engineers involved and said, what's a feasible build, which moved it a little further away from those homes, back out across, but still dives down fairly quickly on the backside of our ridgeline in St. George's boundaries. It comes across those ledges above Middleton and
Mustang
stays fairly
Pass.
low out of the, yeah, as less, they want as minimal impact into the habitat as possible. And that's basically where it's
And
going.
so do I, but it's the human habitat.
Yeah.
And if
They don't care about us.
if the northern corridor connects far enough onto the Washington Parkway, that's going right through where those homes are. It's going right through.
Yeah, that's, see what you've got, you've got those homes that have built a portion of that corridor. That's where, in fact, where it ties in,
Yeah,
we've
but-
already built it.
But
It's
that's
there.
my point. But if they, the northern corridor, not Washington Parkway, but they, the northern corridor, tied up higher above there
Yeah.
so that it was those that were going clear across.
The problem that you had is we built to the habitat, our homes are to the habitat.
I know.
So then you would have to go up and encroach in the habitat.
You
And that's, yeah, that's what they say, we're not going there.
Well, they're gonna have to eventually, so why couldn't they there?
Well, because they're coming in here rather than going up here and then coming back down. So you've got that many more acres of take, if you want to call it that, in your habitat. So they're trying to be as friendly to habitat as they can be, hopefully to get a road through there.
Yeah, I think they need to be friendly to Washington City too.
We fought the fight.
Yeah, okay, I know you know the issue.
Well, I'd like to report if there's nothing else. Two, I think the Planning Commission, it was very insightful to see what they're working on. Obviously, it's a wonderful thing. Thank you for letting me serve on there just for an educational point of view, and grateful for all the Planning Commission does before it gets to us. That was amazing. A few things I know. Mr. Starkey here has a couple of the concerns that he's getting ready to put out from the Planning Commission. They're looking forward to meeting again, obviously, with the council. They've really appreciated those opportunities. One thing that was expressed to me in very clear terms is seeing if we can move forward on a conditional use versus variance discussion and see if we can come to a more clear decision and maybe even talk about some other concerns that they have. With some of the new staff that's come on, and with a few discussions at the end of the meeting, they were discussing ways in which they could better address things that were brought to them. There was a lot of concerns that final plats and, well, not final plats, forgive me, proposed developments and proposed areas didn't have enough detail to properly come before the commission at the time, but due to the nature of the processes in place, there's a lot of things that'll come up and they have to tell them, well, we don't have what we need. And the Planning Commission moved to kind of look more into possibly tabling things more and extending time to try to encourage stuff to be complete before they're trying to vote on it and recommend things for us as a council to come across. Because I saw some things where they were most concerned on that if it was approved and came to us, we would be saying the very same things. So I think continuing our meetings with the Planning Commission is one of the things that they're looking forward to most, and starting to get some more forward momentum on things, especially right now with the conditional use versus variance. So they're looking forward to our presence.
And I think that was in regard, especially in regard to the height, in designating that height as a variance as opposed to the
conditional use, right.
It's hard for us to ask them to do that.
Right.
Thank you. Anything else?
Oh,
One more reporting back from the youth council. They're getting ready for their trip up north in February, but they are going to be doing elections coming up soon. So if you know any kids that want to run, do city council stuff, send them that way.
Thank you.
I believe it's the 19th.
Yeah, 19th and 20th.
No, they changed
They
it.
changed it. No, it's the following week.
25th and 26th.
25th and 26th.
It's because it's President's Day on the 19th.
Yeah,
The
shifted it.
legislators are not in. We have our group going up on the 19th. Afternoon of the 19th. Yeah. City manager report.
Thank you, Mayor. Real quick, Councilwoman Grayson, write this down. I know you're not going to see it. I was going to turn this. Under the presentation last night for the CFPP, the page is titled Budget and Plan of Finance, section 601. So I'll answer your question. So write down under 2, there are 3 periods associated with Washington City's involvement. The first one is called the interim period, which ends fiscal year 2018. That's U.S. fiscal year 2018, which is March. Our cost is $15,180. Our total cost is $91,339. With the incentives, the cost share, the share cost, our portion is 52.
That is a separate sheet that you could email.
It's in your packet.
Oh, I didn't see it.
Tell us the code again.
Slide presentation attached.
Okay.
So the title is Budget and Plan of Finance, section 601.
Okay.
License period number 2, which is the first phase, the total cost would be for us, the total cost for us, this is just for us, would be 1.6 million, our portion is 1.2 million, and that's because of the participation. And then the final period, which again is where your participation goes away. Our total cost is not, the total cost is $9,098,000, and our participation is $9,000,000.
We don't have that.
So it looks like.
It's not in our packet,
So
so,
it's mine.
because you're lucky.
It's in my packet.
It's not ours. See, this is why I don't like Google
And
Docs,
it appears that it's in Jeff's packet. Well, no, I think it's in the regular.
because your staff packets.
No, I think it's in the, if you go to your regular meeting packet, today's
The regular
packet,
meeting packet
it's on the bottom, it's not on the work session packet.
Oh,
Well, you just said it was in the work session.
It's on the regular
I'm
meeting.
sorry, it's under the regular.
Okay, it's not in my regular meeting packet for today.
Very bottom.
regular meeting.
So when did you put
Gotcha.
it there? Because it wasn't there, because I refreshed it before the meeting.
I think it came onto mine somewhere during the meeting, because I couldn't figure out what it was. Until just now, I didn't even know what it was.
Tonight, you mean, tonight?
I think it, for whatever reason, it loaded. It loaded while we're in this meeting.
Because I actually looked at the document.
Yeah,
Didn't
I
see
have it now.
All right, well, just get straight from Kevin to answer your question.
It's in the Mana packet. Mana? Mana?
Yeah, so after the meeting started, it showed up.
So, I think so. Yeah, I can't answer these questions. Again, the important point for us is there an absolute cap of 65 megawatts, or it's a no-go, and we're estimating right now it could be as low as. That's what we.
The page you referenced is what? How far into it was it?
Oh, I don't think know how. It's about a little over halfway if you look at the little slide bar on the side. It's titled Budget and Plan of Finance, and in brackets, section 601. Just a little below, between half and 3/4 of the way.
Does it tell you what slide number it is? Mine has slide numbers. Oh, there's section.
Slide 15. Found it, slide 15.
Okay, so,
Hoot hoagie.
so then Development costs incurred through 3/31/17 is $183,000. That was last year. And the other, not the licensing period, the 1.6 and the 9 million, those costs come in when now?
Well, not all of these will come in when, as we said, when we go to operation, that's when the city begins to pay. Now, if the city backs out, we pay those back. Unless, as we talked about last night, they're able to bring somebody else in to pick up that, and then it's kind of negotiate out if there's a shortfall of some sorts. So.
Councilman Clerk, on that same slide.
By switching those out, if we don't want to be part of it, but
But
I
that's
don't know
our
why we wouldn't want to
exposure.
be part of it.
Exposure is what that negotiation.
That's right.
means.
That's right.
On that same slide that you're looking at on page 15, the third item that's referenced, so it's got I. Okay, the third item is the estimated timeline, and it has the same categories that relate back to the fees under the estimated costs. So the interim period, it says, starts April of 2017, finishes March of 2018. So that might just give you a better idea of when you'll see some of those correlate.
Anyway, I just saw that, Councilwoman, and I thought, let me tell you that before I forget, and you can look at that then at your convenience. I just dropped to you, this is our management report for fiscal year 2017. I'm sorry, I was a little behind on that, it kind of slipped off my radar screen. It's ended June 30th. This is kind of the format we've used for years. I used to do about a 5 to 7 page management report. And I only feel better about this now, knowing that people are not reading 2 pages instead of 5 to 7 pages. So, but I think it still covers what we feel as we talk to the community, what the community would like to see in a nutshell. Then I want to mention this, because this actually came last month, but I forgot to do it. And that is just to remind you, and the council that's been around for a while will recognize this. Being basically an equity member of the Utah Local Governments Trust, we basically, depending on if they have margins they try to hit, when they hit those at the end of the year, and there's based upon experience rating and other things, if the experience ratings are better and other things, and they have the ability to reduce some of that in the future, they disperse that out to their equity members. And so traditionally, the city council has always said we want to earmark that over to help offset health insurance increases. And I just want to mention that this year's premium is $20,654.04. So that came in December. I know some of you have been on the council before, we haven't seen those times past. Not too different, I don't think, from what we've seen in times past. Now, a couple of projects that I'll just update you on. We should begin work on the Red Cliffs tank. We do excuse Mike Shine's. Red Cliffs tank should begin in the next couple of weeks. Letters are currently going out in regards to the road acquisition, in regards to Merrill Road. In regards to the power, the control building walls are now complete on the Green Springs substation. It's very interesting. Looking at the steel structure has gone up, and the ground grid is about 75% in. We drove up today and took a look. I don't know what the street is, but there's a place you can get all the way over to the far subdivision up in the Greenspan area. You look over that wash and see the substation from kind of an up looking down. And steel grid, the steel structure has gone up, and that's essentially the height you'll see. It is a dot. It is really a dot. I mean, we talked about this for a long, long time with a lot of residents. This was not going to be this massive, obtrusive, it's going to wipe my view of Pine Valley Mountain out completely. And it truly is not that. You ever want to kind of drive over that wash, and you'll see what the height of that substation is going to be. Now, there's still wires that come in and other things, but if you'll look at that height of that substation, they're pretty insignificant when you put them in the vast scenery of them. Now, you will notice that there are lines that drop down into the wash and cross over. Those will be the lines, and you guys all remember this. Those are the lines that will eventually go underground. Remember what changed the line? We were able to put that one last section underground, but that hasn't happened yet. Those are the lines. You'll see the pole size change. The change from the transmission line size to the distribution size. Those are the ones that will go underground when we finish that project up. I talked about the OPGW, which of course is the overhead power ground wire. And that's the project that will connect our fiber out to the generation plant. And we just had a pre-construction bid on that, or pre-bid meeting today on that issue. And we've got a fairly short period of time to kind of get that up because we're actually going to be moving some load off those transmission lines going down Telegraph. We're shifting that. Rocky Mountain's doing some stuff, so we're going to shift some power around. That's all going to happen in the spring. We can't shift power out around like that during the summer because of load. So we're trying to fit this OPGW project within that time when we're off because you're above those hot lines working. And so we have it off. It's just much safer, much easier thing to do. We were originally going to just work and see if we could do it kind of all together. We talked to communities around it. St. George is really the only city that has the size of equipment. These are very big rollers, I can't remember what they call them, anyway, the ones that roll the big lines. And they offered it to us. We paid, they got a price for it. But this is not going to be able to happen anytime. So that's part of the pre-bid meeting, is part of this construction. But if we can get it in this year, it still is substantial. It's going to be substantially better for us. So, the boilers and Warm Springs area, as you may know, we've been working with one of the landowners to swap some land around to line the road up, so it lines up with Mill Creek. Yeah, so those roads line up, create an intersection, and they own the property right there. So there's been some swap discussions with Ball Ventures. Ball Ventures is the ones who own it out of Idaho. And Ball Ventures has some desire to develop some of their pieces up there. And Barry got word just this last week because some stormwater lines going through there. It's a little complicated, and so we've been working through that, and they're ready to kind of cement it all up in agreement. So I think we'll be bringing that. That's a big step forward. So. And then the final item I would just mention is columbarium, cemetery. I know we're getting some color samples sent in, and we'll bring those back to the council. If the council take a look at those, it's actually kind of cool. Very gloomy what the total urn burial, I guess you can call urn interments, whatever you want to call it. How many are there in that one columbarium structure?
So we're looking at, there's 64 niches, and each one of those niches is 2. We're looking at, instead of a columbarium, we're looking at ossuarium, and it adds ossuarium, and it's which adds 57 to that. So you got, you have, so 64 times 2, so you have 128 plus 57, 185 total. And that just gives the opportunity for those who's not a couple or, a single or whatever the case, that there's areas without actually buying a niche. And so I have a picture of it. You want me to put it up or not?
Why don't you do that? And once we order this, it's about a 4 to 5 month build, ship,
And what's the cost to put some of these answers in?
what did we end up in the cost, Barry?
So the cost is $27,000 for the columbarium. The ossuarium is $7,000. I think $34,000. So we didn't quite have the funding. I talked to Kimberly. We went into the cemetery budget. We found the money to do that, and so we'll be able to do that. Councilman Turek, I know we talked about that.
What's the charge?
We have set that. I think that's the council. The internment charges.
We don't have that yet. We haven't set that yet. We'll have to. Yeah.
I haven't noticed that's all in black, so, yeah.
We realized it's not a person standing next to it. It looks like they passed away.
Is it a ghost? Is it a real person?
So you see the individuals, the one that has the writing on it there that has 2 names. So that's a niche, and there's 2 remains there, and then the band right above is is where the, it opens up and you can put more remains in the middle. And so that's why there's many names there. So around that, there'll be 50, you know, you can put 57 names, which it'll sit a little taller than that because we already have the base. We already have the base built, and the base sits up 9 inches. So it'll sit on a 9-inch base, so it'll be a little bit taller than what it shows there. But that's what it is, and so we'll be ordering it this week. Well, the next week.
I would bet you'll see, I've had several people over the years contacting me because they've got.
Okay, I still has
He's contacted us all.
Being a place to put them.
Yeah.
Well, one of the,
This is the first one in southern Utah, basically.
really, first one, Southern Utah? I was curious about
One of the
that.
significant things that happened is certainly increased demand. The dominant culture here has now indicated that this is an acceptable way of moving turf. And, but this is still timely because we were having a short discussion this week before the meeting because we're not too far away about the expansion cemetery over there near the soccer field. On
Yeah.
the side. We're getting pretty close to pushing that fence now further.
So with this, we actually have 3 bases already built. So we can accommodate 3 of these. This will be the first one.
What's the cost on these as opposed to a cemetery plot?
We haven't said, yeah.
Do we have a sense? Yeah, do we have a sense around the country what they're running?
Well,
Yeah, it won't be hard. We'll look at model.
They sent, you know, the company I'm working with actually sent, you know, a pricing what they recommend or what I guess is probably done. It's not cheap even then, but then again you say, you know, you don't have a casket, you don't have a vault, you don't, you know, there's a lot of those different things that you don't have, but certainly that's a discussion we'll have, and we want to make it affordable and what we can do for the citizens and still be able to. I know one way we would like to generate some money down the road to build 2 more of these is to have a certain amount of this, you know, when somebody buys that certain amount of that money that goes into it goes into a fund, and then we can pay for another one before we run out. Like a perpetual care. That same type of thing. Mhm. Yeah. Well,
Is the color negotiable?
You're getting samples.
Yes.
Yeah.
Love samples.
I've looked at them, and Councilman Turks looked at them. The ones that I've seen, this is by far the best looking one. And, you know, black. This is really as far as, you know, being more brown and red. You know, that kind of matches what we have as what we would kind of like to see. Yeah.
Oh, go off.
Yeah. Well, yeah. When you think about this space right here is 185 people, that saves a lot of ground.
I just went to a funeral Saturday, and the cost to transport the body to Salt Lake and bury it was $20,000. So they went to ashes. And they probably won't even do that. Probably just do it where everybody else does, is spread the ashes of Snow Canyon.
Isn't that part we'll have a meeting like that with this?
We've talked about a scatter garden. Now the area that we have isn't. The area that we have isn't very big.
Circle of life.
But
Cords growing.
anyway,
Thanks, Barry. All right, thank you. We need to adjourn to a closed session tonight to discuss.
Second. And move to a closed session to discuss property.
Second.
I have a motion and a second.
Granger, aye.
Buff eye.
Ward, aye.
Dallas and I.
Okay. We'll meet in the.
Back over here. Oh. Oh. Yeah. My binder had an issue.
Wow. Take 5 minutes. 5 minutes. We did all 130.